When we think about the story of the human body, it is tempting to imagine it as a tale that begins and ends with us, as if our species were the central chapter in a long book. Yet in truth, the evolution of our form is part of a much older, far quieter narrative that stretches back across the eons. Long before the first humans walked upon the earth, life had already been weaving its patterns through time. Our bodies, every bone, every muscle, every delicate organ, carry within them echoes of this ancient history. To rest with these thoughts is to drift into the awareness that the human body is not merely our own possession, but rather the latest version of a living design that has been shaped, reshaped, and refined for millions of years. The scale of time involved in human evolution can be difficult to comprehend. If we were to imagine the history of life compressed into a single year, humans would only appear in the last few minutes of December 31st. For almost the entirety of that year, the earth was filled with forms of life so different from our own that we would scarcely recognize them. The earliest living cells, tiny and fragile, floated in the oceans. Later, fish swam through vast seas, amphibians crept onto land, and reptiles grew into giants that roamed for ages. Mammals emerged quietly under the shadow of dinosaurs, and only after those giants faded away did mammals expand and diversify, taking on roles in forests, plains, and seas. Among those mammals, one branch of small, tree-dwelling creatures with nimble hands and keen eyes would eventually give rise to us. Our story is therefore not separate from the story of the earth. It is inseparable from the soil that holds fossils, from the forests that nurtured early mammals, from the shifting climates that press species to adapt or fade away. Evolution, though sometimes imagined as a rapid transformation, is in reality a gentle unfolding. It works through small variations, subtle differences passed from one generation to the next. Over time, these differences accumulate, like drops of water filling a vessel, until entire forms are reshaped. The human body was not designed all at once, but sculpted gradually, each adaptation a response to challenges faced by our ancestors. In a quiet way, every part of us speaks of this long journey. The curve of the spine, the arches of the feet, the opposable thumbs, the large and complex brain, each of these carries its own history. Each adaptation marks a chapter in survival, a response to the demands of movement, of tool use, of communication, of community. As we sit here in the present moment, it can be soothing to reflect on the fact that our very bones are time travelers. They hold within them the memory of distant forests, sunlit plains, and shifting ice. The first steps toward humanity were small. Our ancestors did not wake one morning suddenly human. They remained for countless generations, almost indistinguishable from the primates that still climb through tropical canopies today. Slowly, imperceptibly, change occurred. A slightly straighter back here, a thumb more flexible there, a brain that grew fraction by fraction larger. These quiet shifts, spread across millions of years, eventually brought forth a creature that began to walk on two legs, to use hands not only for climbing but for shaping tools, and to gather in communities bound by cooperation and care. It is easy to think of evolution as progress, as if each stage were destined to lead toward us, but that is not how nature works. Evolution is not a ladder but a branching tree. Many close relatives to our line once walked the earth, robust forms, delicate forms, forms with different adaptations, and most of them are gone. We are but one surviving branch, the result of chance as much as necessity. Our existence is not the inevitable outcome of history, but the fragile product of survival. This awareness can be strangely comforting, for it reminds us that we are part of a greater living web, not apart from it. Even now, our bodies carry reminders of that web. The tiny bones within our ears began long ago as parts of the jaws of ancient reptiles. The muscles that allow goosebumps once raised the fur of our mammalian ancestors for warmth. The structure of our spine, while elegant, still reveals the compromises of shifting from 4 legs to 2. These remnants are not flaws, but gentle reminders of continuity. They whisper that the past is still alive within us. The story of our evolution is not only written in bones and fossils, but also in the landscapes our ancestors inhabited. Forests gave rise to hands adapted for grasping branches. Open savannas encouraged walking upright to scan horizons. Rivers and coastlines nourished brains with rich foods that supported growth and complexity. Every adaptation was a dialogue between body and environment, each shaping the other. To study the human form is therefore to study the earth itself, for the two are bound together in an intimate, unbroken relationship. As we move deeper into this exploration, let us hold on to the sense of calm that such reflections bring. Evolution is not a tale of sudden leaps, but of patient shaping, of countless small lives passing forward the quiet gift of existence. Our bodies today are the outcome of those gifts, the living testament to resilience and adaptation. In the same way that a river smooths stones over centuries, so too has evolution shaped us, grain by grain, feature by feature. The human body, as it now stands, is a blend of ancient traits and new adaptations, a design that has served both survival and imagination. It has carried us from the shadow of forests into the wide light of open plains, across mountains and seas, into every climate of the planet. And while much lies ahead, the roots of who we are can be traced back through time, linking us to creatures that lived long before memory. As you listen, perhaps you can imagine this story, not as a dramatic tale, but as a quiet unfolding, like a tree slowly reaching upward toward the sky. There is no rush in evolution, no sudden noise, only the steady rhythm of life, adapting, enduring, and continuing. Our own presence here tonight, in bodies shaped by that long process, is part of the same rhythm. To reflect on it is to feel a connection that stretches backward through countless generations, reminding us that we are, in the deepest sense, children of time. And so we begin our journey, gently, by acknowledging that the evolution of the human body is not only a scientific subject, but also a meditation on belonging. We belong to the earth, to its past and to its present. We belong to the lineage of primates and mammals, and within us resides a record of survival, of adaptation, and of resilience. As we move through this series, part by part, we will slowly trace that story, from early primates to the uniquely human traits that define us. For now, it is enough to rest with the knowledge that our bodies are living archives of history, shaped by patience, and carried forward into the present moment. 2. Life before humans. To understand the story of the human body, it is necessary to step back far before the arrival of primates, before the first mammals, and even before the earliest animals took shape. The body we inhabit today is not a sudden invention, but the culmination of a history that began billions of years ago, when life itself first flickered into existence. This early story unfolds so gradually, across such immense spans of time, that it is difficult for our minds to grasp. Yet if we follow it gently, allowing each stage to unfold like a soft page being turned, we begin to see how the foundation for humanity was laid long before humans themselves existed. The Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago, a world of molten rock and storm-filled skies. For millions of years, it was too harsh to support life. Yet, as the planet cooled, oceans formed, and within those waters, something extraordinary occurred. Simple molecules, drifting and colliding, began to assemble into more complex forms. Out of these chemical interactions emerged the first living cells. They were unimaginably small, and yet they carried within them the essential qualities of life, the ability to take in energy, to reproduce, and to adapt to their surroundings. These early cells would not have seemed remarkable to the eye, but they marked the beginning of a story that would eventually lead to every living thing, including us. For billions of years, life on Earth remained microscopic. Single-celled organisms filled the oceans, thriving in countless forms. Some learned to harvest energy from sunlight through photosynthesis, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. Over vast stretches of time, this oxygen accumulated in the atmosphere, transforming the planet. The air we breathe today owes its very existence to these early organisms. In that sense, every breath we take is a direct link to ancient life, a reminder that our survival rests upon the quiet labor of cells that lived billions of years ago. Eventually, cells began to join forces. Some developed symbiotic relationships, merging into more complex structures. This gave rise to eukaryotic cells, cells with nuclei and specialized parts, the kind found in plants, animals, and fungi. From this leap in complexity came the potential for larger and more intricate life forms. Multicellular organisms appeared, first in the oceans, where they could float, drift, and swim. Sponges, jellyfish, and simple worms were among the early pioneers. Though their forms were far from human, they established patterns of organization, nervous systems, digestive systems, circulatory pathways that would be refined again and again in the bodies of their descendants. Around 500 million years ago, the seas were alive with creatures. This period, often called the Cambrian explosion, saw the sudden flourishing of diverse life forms. Hard shells, jointed limbs, and eyes evolved, bringing new ways to move, to sense, and to survive. Fish became dominant, their streamlined bodies guiding them through currents with grace. Some fish developed sturdy fins and lungs, adaptations that allowed them to venture briefly onto land. In these tentative steps, we glimpse the ancestors of all later land animals, including ourselves. Life on land began in earnest with amphibians, creatures able to breathe, both in water and in air. They were followed by reptiles, whose scaly skin and protective eggs freed them from dependence on watery environments. For millions of years, reptiles ruled, growing into immense and varied forms. Dinosaurs emerged and spread across the continents, filling niches from massive plant eaters to swift predators. Meanwhile, small mammals lived quietly in their shadow, often no larger than mice or shrews. These early mammals carried within them traits that would prove essential later: warm-blooded bodies, live birth, and the care of offspring. When the age of dinosaurs came to an end, about 66 million years ago, it was mammals that seized the opportunity to flourish. Freed from their giant competitors, they diversified rapidly. Some took to the seas, becoming whales and dolphins. Others grew into hoofed grazers and prowling predators. Among these branches, a group of small, tree-dwelling creatures developed grasping hands and forward-facing eyes. They were the primates, and it is here that the first recognizable signs of our lineage appear. The story of life before humans is not only a sequence of forms, but also a story of adaptation. Each body that appeared was a response to the pressures of its environment: the need to find food, to avoid predators, to reproduce successfully. Fins evolved to move more efficiently through water. Wings evolved to take advantage of the open sky. Warm-bloodedness allowed mammals and birds to thrive even when temperatures shifted. In each case, the body was shaped not by design, but by persistence. The forms that survived were those that worked well enough to continue the line. When we look at our own bodies today, we can still see traces of this deep history. The structure of our limbs, with one upper bone, two lower bones, and a cluster of smaller bones at the ends, is a pattern first set down in fish fins. The arrangement of our teeth reflects ancient struggles between plant-eating and meat-eating ancestors. Even the way our embryos develop in the womb recapitulates older forms. At certain stages, Tiny human embryos possess tails and gill-like structures, fleeting reminders of the aquatic past. These echoes are not accidents. They are imprints left by the long chain of bodies that preceded us. The transition from simple cells to primates is a journey of patience. At no point was the destination predetermined. Life did not evolve with the aim of producing humans, and yet through countless adaptations, here we are. What is remarkable is not that evolution produced us specifically, but that it produced such diversity of life along the way. From the smallest insect to the tallest tree, every living being today shares in this same inheritance. We are all connected, each a variation on themes that began in the earliest oceans. Reflecting on life before humans brings a sense of humility. It reminds us that we are part of a story much greater than ourselves. The world was teeming with life for billions of years before our arrival, and it will likely continue long after we are gone. The bodies we inhabit are temporary vessels in a much larger process, carriers of traits that have been tested and refined through ages. To rest in this knowledge is to feel a gentle belonging, not as rulers of life, but as participants in its ongoing flow. And so, as we prepare to move forward in our exploration, from the vast pre-human world into the emergence of primates and early hominins, it is helpful to hold in mind this foundation. The human body is not an isolated miracle, but a continuation of what came before. It is a bridge between past and present, between ancient oceans and modern landscapes. To study our evolution is to honor that bridge, to recognize in ourselves the quiet persistence of life that began long before memory, long before thought, in the silent depths of the sea. 3. The rise of primates. In the quiet unfolding of life's long story, there came a time when the stage was set for a new kind of creature. These beings were small at first, not the dominant forms of their world, but they carried within them a set of traits that would open paths toward remarkable futures. They were the primates, and though at their beginning they were only one branch among many mammals, their way of life would eventually lead to us. To understand how the human body came to be, we must first rest with the story of the primates, those agile, social, and curious creatures whose bodies prepared the way for our own. The world in which primates first appeared was lush with forests. This was some 60 million years ago, not long after the extinction of the great dinosaurs. With those ancient giants gone, mammals of many forms spread into the open spaces of the earth. Some became great grazers of the plains, others fierce hunters of the shadows. Still others returned to the seas to become whales and dolphins. But in the warm, leafy environments of tropical forests, certain small mammals found a way of life that was neither on the ground nor in the open water but high among branches and leaves. It was here that primates took shape. Living in trees required special abilities, to leap from branch to branch, to cling securely while foraging, to gauge distances accurately in the shifting light of leaves. These challenges shaped primate bodies. Eyes moved to the front of the face, providing overlapping fields of vision that allowed depth perception. This change, simple to describe, was profound in effect. It meant that primates could judge how far to leap, could sense where fruit hung among the foliage, could track the movements of predators or companions with precision. Today, when we catch a ball or pour water into a glass, we rely on the same forward-facing vision first refined in the ancient forests. Hands, too, became special in these creatures. Unlike the paws of many other mammals, primate hands developed fingers that could curl and grasp. Nails replaced claws, providing sensitive tips for touch, rather than sharp weapons for tearing. The thumb, in many species, became opposable, able to move across the palm to meet the fingers. This ability to grip firmly and delicately, to hold onto branches, to pluck fruits, to groom one another's fur, was one of the hallmarks of primate evolution. The very dexterity we use to write, to sew, to shape tools is built upon these early adaptations. Primates also lived socially, high in the trees, surrounded by dangers both above and below. Survival often depended on groups rather than individuals. Many primates formed troops, sharing responsibilities for vigilance, for care of young, for defense against threats. Communication in these groups grew complex, not always with words but with expressions, gestures, and sounds. The muscles of the face, capable of producing subtle movements, became instruments of connection. A raised brow, a softened gaze, a slight curl of lips, such signals guided interactions long before language was born. In this way, the roots of human social behavior can be traced back to the faces of primates. Over millions of years, primates diversified. Some remained small and nimble, like lemurs and tarsiers, moving with grace through night and day. Others grew larger, their lives centered on fruit, leaves, or insects. Monkeys emerged, both in the old world of Africa and Asia, and in the new world of the Americas. Though separated by oceans, both groups developed long tails for balance and agility, as well as intricate social lives. Yet in Africa and Asia, another branch arose. The apes. They had larger brains relative to body size, more flexible shoulders for swinging, and more complex behaviors. From this lineage came gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and eventually, humans. The rise of primates is not only the story of anatomy, but also the story of relationships with the environment. Fruits and leaves guided their foraging, leading to color vision in many species, so they could distinguish ripe foods among the greenery. Predators in the forest encouraged vigilance and cooperation. The demands of balancing, climbing, and leaping shaped not just muscles and bones, but also nervous systems capable of quick coordination. Every adaptation was a response, a gentle dialogue between body and environment. When we consider the human body today, we find traces of these ancient arboreal lives. Our shoulders remain highly mobile, able to rotate in wide arcs. Our nails, though modest, reflect a time when touch was vital for foraging. Our vision, rich in color, recalls the task of spotting fruit among leaves. Even our social instincts, our tendency to seek companionship, to interpret expressions, to share care within families, can be seen as an inheritance from primate ancestors. It is worth noting that primates were never the only way life could have gone. Other mammals adapted to trees in their own ways. Squirrels with sharp claws, bats with wings. But primates chose the path of grasping, of vision, of sociality. That path led eventually to hands capable of art, eyes capable of reading, and communities capable of culture. The uniqueness of primates lies not in any one trait but in the combination of them all, woven together into a form both agile and intelligent. The forests that sheltered primates were themselves changing across time. Climate shifts expanded and contracted woodlands, forcing some groups to adapt to more open environments. These pressures would eventually set the stage for the first steps onto savannas, for the beginnings of bipedalism, and for the slow journey toward humanity. But for tens of millions of years, primates remained creatures of the trees, perfecting the skills of climbing, grasping, seeing, and communicating. These were the quiet foundations upon which later human traits would be built. To imagine the rise of primates is to picture a world alive with sound and movement, the rustle of leaves as groups foraged together, the calls echoing through canopies, the play of young ones swinging with abandon. It is a scene both familiar and distant, for though we no longer live in trees, we carry the memory of that life within us, in our children's play, in our ability to judge a leap, in our reliance on social bonds. the forest still whispers. And so, as we drift gently through this chapter of evolution, we can see the primates not only as ancestors but as companions in a larger story. Many still live among us today, reminders of the paths life has taken and the branches it has preserved. To study them is to glimpse our own reflection, not identical, resonant, echoing across millions of years. Their rise prepared the way for ours, their bodies carrying the seeds of possibility that would one day blossom into humanity. The rise of primates was not the end of the journey, but it was a crucial beginning. From these creatures came the gifts of vision, dexterity, and social life, gifts we still rely upon in every moment of our existence. As we move forward into the story of great apes and early hominins, we will see how these gifts were expanded and refined, setting the stage for the long path that led from forest branches to the open plains, and from there to the human body itself. 4. Great apes and human kinship. The story of primates gradually unfolds into a more familiar chapter when we reach the great apes, for it is here that we find our closest living relatives. To speak of apes is to speak of kinship, of a shared ancestry that binds us to beings who still walk the earth today. When we observe a gorilla pausing in contemplation, or a chimpanzee grooming a companion, or an orangutan fashioning a tool from a branch, we see reflections of ourselves, not in a figurative sense, but in a literal evolutionary one. The great apes remind us that humanity is not an island, but a branch on a vast family tree that continues to flourish around us. The apes belong to a group known as hominoids, which includes both the so-called lesser apes, like the gibbons, and the great apes, which comprise orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans. Each of these species carries within its body and behavior echoes of our shared ancestry, but also unique pathways of adaptation. To spend time reflecting on them is to understand the diversity of possibilities that evolution has explored within a form similar to our own. Orangutans, dwelling in the forests of Borneo and Sumatra, are solitary for much of their lives. Their long arms and curved fingers are perfectly suited for swinging through trees, and their diet centers on fruits that ripen unpredictably, encouraging them to travel widely in search of nourishment. Their intelligence reveals itself in careful problem-solving and in the construction of sleeping nests each evening, woven high among the branches. In their quiet patience, we can sense an ancestral connection, as if part of our own reflective nature mirrors theirs. Gorillas, by contrast, live in structured family groups, led by a dominant male, often recognized by the silver streak of fur across his back. They are ground-dwelling, gentle foragers, feeding largely on leaves and stems, though their massive bodies might suggest otherwise. Their social bonds are strong, with mothers caring attentively for young and groups moving together in cohesive units. The chest-beating display of a silverback is famous, but more common are the subtle signals of grooming, eye contact, and protective gestures that ensure harmony. Within their societies, we glimpse the early roots of our own family structures and community life. The chimpanzees and bonobos are perhaps the most intriguing of our relatives, for their behavior offers striking parallels to our own. Chimpanzees live in dynamic social groups known as fission fusion societies, where subgroups split and rejoin depending on resources and relationships. They are tool makers, stripping leaves from twigs to fish termites from mounds, or using stones to crack open nuts. Their cooperation in hunting and their conflicts over dominance resonate with human patterns of competition and alliance. Bonobos, close cousins of chimpanzees, offer a contrasting vision of social life. They are known for their matriarchal structures, their emphasis on cooperation, and their tendency to resolve tensions through social bonds rather than aggression. Between chimpanzees and bonobos, we see two possible pathways of social evolution. both of which illuminate aspects of our own nature. What binds all great apes together is not merely physical resemblance, but deep genetic similarity. Humans share approximately 98 to 99% of their DNA with chimpanzees and bonobos, and only slightly less with gorillas and orangutans. This shared heritage explains why their faces, their gestures, their hands, and their emotions seem so familiar to us. Their laughter during play, their grief at loss, their curiosity toward new objects. These are not distant, alien responses, but echoes of the same emotional fabric we carry within ourselves. In truth, when we look into the eyes of a great ape, we are not gazing across a vast gulf, but across a narrow branch of time. The evolutionary split between humans and our closest relatives occurred several million years ago. Before that divergence, there existed ancestral populations in Africa that carried the seeds of both our lineage and theirs. Some of those populations gave rise to the chimpanzees and bonobos of today, while others continued along the path that would eventually become human. The differences that now separate us, our fully upright posture, our expanded brains, our reliance on language and culture, are the result of adaptations that accumulated after that branching. But beneath those differences remains a shared foundation, a reminder that we are kin in the most direct biological sense. The bodies of great apes reflect a balance between arboreal and terrestrial life. Broad chests, strong shoulders, and long arms reveal a heritage of climbing, while sturdy legs and broad feet reflect increasing time on the ground. Their skulls, with prominent brow ridges and powerful jaws, reveal diets that required significant chewing, though their brains are already relatively large compared to most mammals. In every feature, one can see the compromises and adaptations that shaped their survival. In studying them, scientists learn not only about apes, but about the forms that preceded humanity, offering windows into what early hominins may have been like. Beyond anatomy lies the realm of behavior, where the similarities are most striking. Chimpanzees wage territorial conflicts, form alliances, and even display rudimentary political strategies. Bonobos share food, strengthen bonds through physical contact, and nurture cooperation. Gorillas demonstrate leadership tempered with protection. Orangutans, often solitary, nevertheless reveal immense creativity and intelligence. To observe them is to witness the spectrum of possibilities that social living can take. Possibilities that humanity has explored and reshaped through its own cultures and histories. It is important to reflect gently on what this kinship means. For much of human history, people believed themselves entirely separate from other animals, unique and apart. The study of evolution, and especially the recognition of our closeness to the great apes, softens that view. We are not alone, nor are we detached from the rest of life. Instead, we are deeply connected, our bodies and behaviors built from the same raw material, shaped by the same forces, responding to the same rhythms of survival and reproduction. To feel this connection is to feel a quiet belonging, not only to humanity, but to the broader family of life. In the stillness of reflection, one can imagine the ancient forests where our shared ancestors lived. Among the trees, groups of apes moved, foraging, grooming, raising young. Within those groups, there was curiosity, fear, affection, and rivalry, emotions we know well. From those communities, one lineage eventually stepped onto a different path, experimenting with more upright walking, crafting tools in new ways, and later developing symbolic thought. Yet even as humans traveled far along that path, the kinship remains. The great apes remind us that humanity is not a break from nature, but a continuation of it. The presence of great apes today is a living mirror of what we once were, and of what we still are in many ways. Their hands, their eyes, their expressions, their societies all echo our own. When we study them, or simply imagine their lives, We are reminded of our place within the larger web of evolution. Their existence helps us see more clearly the roots of our own form, preparing us for the next stage of our story, the emergence of early hominins, those first beings who began to walk upright and carry the earliest signs of humanity within their bones. 5. Early hominins. From the quiet canopy of the great apes, where life was measured in the rhythm of climbing, foraging, and grooming, the story of human evolution takes a subtle but profound turn. Somewhere in the forests and open landscapes of Africa, a branch of our shared lineage began to explore a new way of moving, a new way of living. These were the early hominins, beings who were not quite ape and not yet human, but who carried within their bodies the first signs of a transformation that would eventually lead to us. Their fossils, scattered across time and earth, are like whispers from a forgotten past, fragments that tell us of experimentation, adaptation, and change. The earliest hominins lived several million years ago. Their world was shifting. Africa was no longer entirely cloaked in dense tropical forests. Climate change was gradually opening the landscape, creating mosaics of woodland and savanna. For a creature accustomed to the branches, this environment posed challenges. To find food, one had to cross open ground. To spot predators, one had to look above tall grasses. To survive, new ways of moving and living were required. It is in this context that the first signs of upright walking appear. Australopithecus, one of the most famous early hominins, provides us with a glimpse of this stage. With a body that still bore many ape-like features, such as long arms and curved fingers for climbing, Australopithecus also walked upright on two legs. The pelvis, shortened and broadened, supported this posture. The leg bones reveal weight-bearing adaptations. The footprints preserved in volcanic ash at Laetoli in Tanzania, more than 3 million years old, show unmistakably that these beings walked in a bipedal fashion. To see those prints is to imagine a small group crossing a plain, their feet pressing into soft ash that would harden and remain as a record across the ages. Why bipedalism emerged is still a question of gentle debate. Some suggest it freed the hands for carrying food or infants. Others believe it was a way to conserve energy when traveling long distances across savannas. Perhaps it offered a height advantage for spotting danger, or allowed bodies to cool more efficiently under the open sunday. The true answer may be a combination of all these. What matters most is that walking upright set the course for everything that followed. It reshaped the spine, the pelvis, the legs, the feet. It freed the hands for tasks that would grow in importance. It changed the way early hominins interacted with the world. The brains of these beings were still small, closer in size to those of chimpanzees than to modern humans. Yet there were already signs of growing complexity. The use of simple tools may have begun at this stage, perhaps with rocks used for pounding or sticks for probing. Even without sophisticated technology, the freedom of the hands, coupled with a sharp sense of observation, allowed for behaviors that pushed beyond the limits of other animals. The seeds of human ingenuity were being sown, though still in their earliest stages. Fossil evidence also reveals the blending of traits. Some hominins had faces that projected forward, with strong jaws and large teeth for chewing tough plants, while others showed slightly reduced jaws and dental patterns that hinted at changing diets. The diversity of forms suggests that evolution was experimenting, producing different variations of hominins, some of which thrived for a time before disappearing. This branching, this trial and error, is the very nature of evolution. Not every form is a direct ancestor of humans. Many were cousins, exploring alternative paths, leaving behind fossils that enrich the picture of our history. To imagine early hominins is to picture beings both familiar and strange. They stood upright, yet they likely still climbed trees for safety and food. They lived in small groups, perhaps family bands, sharing care of young, foraging together, and keeping watch against predators. Their lives were vulnerable, dependent on cooperation and awareness. Yet within their fragile existence lay resilience, a capacity to adapt that carried them forward through changing climates and shifting landscapes. The discovery of Lucy, a 3 million-year-old Australopithecus afarensis skeleton, brought this stage of evolution vividly into focus. Though small, only about a meter tall, her bones revealed the unmistakable adaptations of bipedal walking. To look upon her reconstructed form is to see a bridge between worlds. The long arms of a climber, the strong legs of a walker, the face of a creature both ape-like and human-like. Lucy, and others like her, embody the transitional nature of early hominins. They remind us that humanity did not emerge fully formed, but through gradual changes, each one building upon the last. The world they inhabited was demanding. Predators stalked the grasslands, from big cats to crocodiles. Food sources were scattered and seasonal. Water was not always nearby. To survive meant to be alert, resourceful, and social. These pressures, over countless generations, encouraged further adaptations. Those who could walk more efficiently, who could use their hands more skillfully, who could cooperate more closely. Slowly, the hominin form became more distinct, moving step by step away from its ape relatives. As we reflect on these beings, it is important to remember that they were not striving toward becoming human. Evolution has no foresight, no ultimate goal. Early hominins were simply living beings, shaped by their environments, finding ways to endure. It is only in retrospect that we can trace a line through them to ourselves. They did not know they were ancestors. They did not know that millions of years later, beings would study their bones and marvel at the footprints they left in ash. They lived their lives as all creatures do, responding to the world around them, caring for their young, seeking food, finding shelter, facing danger. And yet, through those ordinary acts of survival, they carried forward the traits that would one day blossom into humanity. To rest with the image of early hominins is to rest with humility. They were not grand rulers of their world, but small and vulnerable creatures, surviving on the edge of forests and plains. Yet within their modest lives, great transformations were unfolding. Upright posture, free hands, social bonds. These were the quiet beginnings of the human body as we know it. As we prepare to follow the story into the emergence of more advanced hominins, with larger brains and more refined tools, we carry with us the memory of this stage. It is the stage of transition, of experiment, of small steps across open ground. It is the stage when our lineage first began to walk a path separate from that of other apes, though still close enough to reveal our shared heritage. In early hominins, we see the dawn of humanity, not yet bright and clear, but shimmering gently on the horizon. 6. The gift of bipedalism. Among all the adaptations that shaped the human body, few are as distinctive or as transformative as the ability to walk on two legs. Bipedalism, the act of moving upright on two limbs rather than four, was not an invention that happened all at once. It was the result of countless small changes, accumulated across millions of years, that gradually shifted the posture, balance, and entire design of our bodies. To walk upright seems so natural to us now that we rarely notice its complexity. But when we pause and reflect, it becomes clear that bipedalism is one of the defining gifts of our lineage, setting us apart from most of the animal kingdom and shaping nearly every part of our anatomy. The earliest hominins were not fully upright in the way modern humans are. They retained many traits suited to climbing, with long arms and curved fingers that allowed them to cling to branches. Yet, as environments shifted and open grasslands expanded, the advantages of walking upright grew more significant. An upright posture meant that a hominin could see farther over the tall grasses of the savanna, spotting predators or food sources before it was too late. It meant that hands were freed from the constant task of supporting weight during locomotion, opening them to new roles such as carrying, gathering, or eventually using tools. It also allowed for more efficient long-distance travel, conserving energy across the vast open spaces of Africa. The shift to bipedalism required profound changes in the body. The spine, which in quadrupeds is more or less a straight line, developed an elegant shaped curve. This curvature acted as a spring and a stabilizer, absorbing shock while walking and keeping the body's center of gravity balanced above the hips. The pelvis shortened and broadened, providing support for internal organs and anchoring strong muscles that powered upright walking. The legs grew longer in proportion to the arms, allowing longer strides and greater efficiency. The knees angled inward slightly, bringing the feet closer to the midline and keeping balance steady with each step. Perhaps most striking was the transformation of the feet. In climbing primates, the foot is flexible, with a grasping big toe that can curl around branches. In hominins, the foot became a platform, with the big toe aligned forward and the arches of the foot acting as springs. This design turned the foot into a lever, propelling the body forward with each step. Even today, when we walk or run, the push-off from the big toe is the final motion that propels us onward, a quiet reminder of how this adaptation shapes our every move. Walking upright may seem simple, but it is a marvel of balance and coordination. Each step involves a delicate interplay between muscles, bones, and nerves. The head must remain steady as the body moves beneath it. The arms swing gently, counterbalancing the legs. The pelvis tilts, the knees bend, and the feet roll from heel to toe in a rhythm so practiced we hardly notice. Infants learning to walk reveal how complex it is, wobbling and falling until their muscles strengthen and their balance matures. What feels effortless in adulthood is the result of an intricate dance of anatomy perfected through evolution. There were trade-offs in this transformation. Bipedalism placed new stresses on the spine, the hips, and the knees. Back pain, slipped discs, and joint problems are common in humans, precisely because our bodies are balancing the demands of upright posture. Childbirth also became more difficult. The reshaped pelvis narrowed the birth canal even as the brain began to enlarge, creating a challenging balance between locomotion and reproduction. These difficulties did not prevent survival, but they illustrate how evolution is not a process of perfect design, but of compromise. Adaptations open new possibilities, but they also bring new challenges. Despite these costs, the benefits of bipedalism were profound. Freed hands could carry food over distances, gather wood for shelter or fire, or hold and protect infants while moving. They could shape tools, eventually leading to new technologies that extended human reach. Upright posture also changed the way early hominins interacted with the environment. Instead of being bound to trees, they could traverse grasslands, explore riversides, and cover vast ranges. This mobility encouraged migration and dispersal, which would later allow humans to spread across the globe. The act of walking upright also influenced the way hominins communicated. When the face is lifted from the ground and oriented forward, expressions become more visible to companions. Gestures of the hands, movements of the head, and the subtleties of the eyes could be more easily observed. In this way, bipedalism may have quietly prepared the ground for the complex social communication that would one day flourish into language. The simple act of standing tall allowed early humans to look each other directly in the eye, sharing information and emotion in ways that four-legged postures did not easily permit. We can imagine those early hominins moving across the landscape, their silhouettes distinct against the horizon. They were not yet fully human, but their stride was already something new. With each step, they embodied the gift of bipedalism, carrying with them the beginnings of a journey that would shape everything from anatomy to society. Their footprints, like those preserved in the volcanic ash at Laetoli, are not just impressions in the earth, but impressions in time, evidence of a moment when walking upright became the path forward. Today, when we walk across a room, climb a hill, or set out on a long journey, we are repeating a pattern, millions of years in the making. The muscles in our calves, the sway of our arms, the alignment of our spine, all of these are echoes of the evolutionary experiments that led to bipedalism. To reflect on this is to realize that every step we take connects us back to ancient ancestors who first ventured out of the forest and onto the plains. Walking is more than locomotion. It is a signature of our humanity, a gentle but enduring marker of who we are. The gift of bipedalism is not only practical but also symbolic. To walk upright is to inhabit the world differently. It changes the way we see, the way we reach, the way we connect. It placed us in a position to create culture, to develop tools, to gaze at the stars, to build homes and cities. Without it, the human story would never have unfolded as it did. Every innovation, every journey, every step in history rests, quite literally, on the foundation of walking upright. And so, as we reflect on this adaptation, we do so with a sense of gratitude. Bipedalism is not a triumph of perfection, but a quiet unfolding of possibilities. It brought both challenges and gifts, reshaping the body in ways that were both costly and transformative. Yet without it, we would not be who we are. To stand upright is to carry forward millions of years of change, to embody the patience of evolution in every stride. As we move gently through this story, we carry with us the understanding that our bodies are walking archives of history, each step a reminder of the gift that set us apart. 7. The evolution of the hand. When we consider what makes the human body so distinct, the hand often emerges as one of the most remarkable features. It is a tool, an instrument, a communicator, and an artist's brush, all contained within a structure of bones, muscles, and nerves that fit within the span of a few inches. The story of the human hand is not separate from the story of our evolution but woven into it, a reflection of how our lineage gradually became capable not only of surviving but of shaping the world around us. To trace the evolution of the hand is to trace the journey from branches in the forest to tools, art, and the delicate tasks that define humanity. The earliest primates already possessed hands suited for grasping. Living in trees demanded agility, and claws were of limited use when moving across thin branches or plucking ripe fruit. Instead, flat nails replaced claws, giving primates sensitive fingertips. Fingers became more flexible, able to wrap around branches with precision. The thumb, though not yet fully opposable in the earliest species, was beginning to gain independence from the palm, allowing a stronger grip. These early adaptations created the foundation upon which later refinements would be built. As millions of years passed, hands grew more capable of fine movements. In many primates, such as monkeys, the hands are skilled, able to grasp and manipulate objects, though the thumb often remains shorter relative to the fingers. In great apes, especially in chimpanzees and orangutans, the hands reveal a mixture of climbing design and manipulation ability. Long, curved fingers support life among branches, while the thumb has grown more opposable, allowing for rudimentary tool use. When chimpanzees strip leaves from a twig to create a tool for termite fishing, they are demonstrating the deep evolutionary roots of manual dexterity. But in humans, the hand became something more. Compared to other primates, our fingers are shorter and straighter, while our thumbs are longer and more powerful. This arrangement allows for what is known as the precision grip, the ability to hold an object between the tip of the thumb and the tip of another finger. With this grip, we can thread a needle, carve a piece of wood, or press keys in sequence to form words. We can hold a pen, pluck a string on an instrument, or carefully tie a knot. No other species has achieved this exact combination of strength and fine control. The structure of the hand reveals the balance between power and delicacy. The bones of the palm provide a stable base, while the joints of the fingers allow flexibility. Tendons run through narrow sheaths, transmitting the pull of muscles in the forearm to the tips of the fingers. This arrangement means that much of the hand's strength is generated not in the hand itself, but in the muscles of the arm, leaving the hand relatively slender while still capable of powerful action. Within the fingertips lie dense clusters of nerves, making them exquisitely sensitive to texture, pressure, and vibration. To run a finger over a surface is to engage one of the most refined sensory instruments in the body, an instrument shaped by millions of years of refinement. The hand did not evolve in isolation. Its development is closely tied to the changes in posture and locomotion that freed it from constant weight-bearing. As bipedalism became the primary mode of movement, the hands were released from supporting the body and became available for new tasks. This freedom transformed their role. They were no longer primarily tools for climbing and balance, but instruments for exploration and manipulation. With each step that the feet carried forward, the hands were left free to shape the world. Early humans used this gift to craft tools. Stones were struck together to create sharp edges, bones were shaped into points, and sticks were refined into spears. These acts required not only dexterity, but also imagination. The hand and the brain worked together, one generating the idea of what could be done, the other carrying it out with precision. In this partnership lay the seeds of culture, technology, and art. To hold a tool is to extend the body, to project the hand's power beyond its physical limits. The spear reaches farther than the arm. The brush records what the eye sees. The plow reshapes the soil. Each innovation builds upon the capacity of the hand to hold, shape, and act. The hand also became an organ of communication. Long before words were spoken, gestures conveyed meaning. A wave could signal greeting. A pointed finger could direct attention. A raised hand could signal caution. The flexibility of the fingers allowed for subtlety, for the shaping of symbols that could represent ideas. Even today, hands speak alongside our voices, emphasizing, illustrating, or even replacing words altogether. In many cultures, entire languages of gesture evolved, carried by the expressive power of the hand. There is also artistry in the hand's evolution. Cave paintings, etched thousands of years ago, often include the outlines of human hands pressed against stone walls, as if to declare presence, identity, and belonging. These prints are among the earliest self-portraits, simple yet profound. They remind us that the hand is not only a tool for survival, but a medium for expression, carrying the thoughts of the mind into visible form. From sculpture to music to writing, the human hand has been the agent through which imagination takes shape. Yet, like all adaptations, the evolution of the hand carries trade-offs. The same complexity that allows fine control also makes the hand vulnerable to injury. The delicate tendons can strain, the small joints can wear down, and the sensitivity of the fingertips can be lost through damage. The hand is both powerful and fragile, a reminder that evolutionary gifts come with costs. Still, the balance struck between strength and delicacy has proven enduring, carrying our species through challenges and opportunities alike. To reflect on the hand is to reflect on intimacy. Every touch we share, every object we craft, every word we write passes through this small structure. It connects us to our ancestors, who once used their hands to shape stone or kindle fire, and it connects us to one another through gestures of comfort, guidance, and care. In a sense, the hand embodies the human story, a story of survival, creativity, and connection. When we look at our hands today, we may see only familiar tools of daily life, yet within them lies a history as old as our lineage, a record of adaptation and innovation. They are shaped by the forests where our ancestors grasped branches, by the savannas where they carried food, by the workshops where they struck stone against stone, and by the caves where they pressed their palms to walls. The hand is a map of evolution, inscribed in bone and flesh, guiding us gently through the story of what it means to be human. 8. Tools and early technology. The evolution of the human hand and the growth of the human brain created a partnership that would come to define our species. This partnership expressed itself most clearly in the making and using of tools. Tools are more than objects. They are extensions of the body and the mind, carrying human thought outward into the world. To craft a tool is to imagine a possibility and then to give it physical form. It is to take the raw materials of the earth, stone, wood, bone, and shape them into instruments that serve new purposes. The story of tools and early technology is not just the story of survival, but the story of how humans began to transform their surroundings, and in turn, transform themselves. The earliest known tools are simple stone implements, chipped and flaked to create sharp edges. These tools, sometimes referred to as Oldowan tools, date back more than 2.5 million years. To create one, an early human struck one stone against another, detaching a sharp fragment that could cut, scrape, or pierce. Though these tools appear simple to us, they represent a profound leap. They required foresight, skill, and practice. The act of selecting a stone, striking it in a certain way, and using the resulting edge reveals both planning and learning. Each chipped edge is a testimony to the mind behind the hand. With tools, the possibilities of survival expanded. Sharp edges could cut meat from animal carcasses, allowing early humans to access rich sources of protein. Scrapers could prepare hides for clothing or shelter. Simple pounding stones could crack nuts or bones, releasing hidden nourishment. The use of tools widened the diet, broadened the environments where survival was possible, and reduced reliance on sheer physical strength. In this sense, tools became equalizers, enabling small groups to compete with larger predators and harsher conditions. Over time, tools grew more sophisticated. The Acheulean tradition, which began more than 1 million years ago, introduced hand axes, carefully shaped stones with symmetrical edges. These tools required not just random strikes but deliberate craftsmanship. The repeated flaking from both sides to produce a teardrop-shaped implement demonstrates a mind capable of envisioning a final form and working systematically toward it. These hand axes could chop wood, butcher large animals, or dig for roots. They were multi-purpose instruments, carried over long distances, and used in countless tasks. To hold one today is to feel the weight of ancient intention, to sense the rhythm of hands that labored long ago. The making of tools was not only a matter of individual skill, but of learning and transmission. Knowledge had to be passed down from one generation to the next. Children watched, imitated, and practiced under the guidance of elders. In this way, tool-making became one of the earliest forms of cultural inheritance. Each new generation did not need to reinvent techniques, but could build upon what came before. This continuity is one of the hallmarks of humanity, the ability to accumulate knowledge and carry it forward across time. The connection between tools and the human body is profound. The freedom of the hands, granted by bipedalism, made it possible to hold and shape objects. The sensitivity of the fingertips guided fine adjustments. The strength of the grip allowed forceful strikes. At the same time, the growing brain provided the imagination to see how one object might be transformed into another, how stone might become edge, how wood might become spear. In this partnership between hand and mind, technology was born. Fire, too, can be considered an early technology. Though it is uncertain exactly when humans first controlled it, evidence suggests that fire was in use hundreds of thousands of years ago. To harness fire was to unlock warmth in cold nights, light in darkness, and safety against predators. It also transformed food, making it easier to chew, easier to digest, and safer to eat. Cooking allowed humans to gain more energy from the same resources, fueling the growth of the brain. The ability to kindle and maintain fire became as essential as the crafting of stone tools, a skill carried within communities and shared through teaching. The social dimension of tools and technology cannot be overlooked. To make tools often required cooperation. One person might strike stone, another gather materials, another use the tool for hunting or preparing food. Fire, once kindled, became a gathering place where groups could share warmth, food, and stories. In these shared spaces, technology was not only practical but cultural. It shaped the rhythms of life, drawing people together and deepening bonds. The sparks of community and imagination grew in the glow of early tools and fires. Over thousands of generations, the accumulation of tools reshaped human life. Spears extended the reach of the hand, allowing prey to be hunted from a distance. Needles fashioned from bone allowed hides to be sewn into clothing. Containers made from hollowed wood or woven fibers allowed water and food to be stored and transported. Each new innovation altered the relationship between humans and their environment. Instead of adapting only to what was given, humans began to adapt their surroundings to themselves. Technology became a means of shaping landscapes, securing food, and imagining possibilities beyond the limits of the body alone. To reflect on the earliest tools is to reflect on the first stirrings of creativity. These objects were not just survival aids, but expressions of the mind's capacity to see potential. A stone, in one view, is only a stone, but in another, it is a blade, a scraper, a hammer. The ability to see beyond the immediate, to envision transformation, is one of the quiet revolutions of humanity. It allowed our ancestors to step out of the rhythm of nature's limits and into a rhythm of their own making. Even today, we carry this legacy. Every object we use, from the simplest utensil to the most advanced device, is an echo of those first chipped stones. Each is an extension of the hand and the mind working together. Our tools have grown more complex, but the essence is unchanged. To take the materials of the world and shape them to serve new purposes, to imagine what does not yet exist and bring it into being. This is the story that began with the first spark struck from stone and continues in every act of human creation. The early tools and technologies were modest, yet their impact was immense. They changed what it meant to be human, not in sudden leaps, but in quiet increments. With each generation, knowledge deepened, skills sharpened, and possibilities widened. These tools were the foundation upon which culture, art, science, and civilization would one day be built. To honor them is to honor the hands that shaped them, the minds that imagined them, and the communities that carried their knowledge forward. And so, when we consider the human body, we must also consider the tools it has always carried. They are not separate from us, but extensions of us. Part of the unfolding story of our evolution, to hold a stone blade, to strike sparks into flame, to weave fibers into rope. These acts are as much a part of the human body as walking or breathing. They reveal the partnership of hand and mind, the deep roots of culture, and the quiet beginnings of a journey that would one day lead to the full flowering of humanity. 9. Fire and food. Among the many turning points in the story of human evolution, few were as transformative as the mastery of fire. Fire is both simple and profound. It is heat and light, protection and power, a force both creative and destructive. For countless millennia, it flickered in the natural world in lightning strikes, in volcanic eruptions, in the slow smolder of dry grasslands. But only when humans learned to harness it did fire become a companion, a constant presence that would reshape bodies, diets, societies, and even the mind itself. To reflect on fire and food is to reflect on how a flickering flame altered the course of human history in ways both subtle and immense. The earliest evidence of controlled fire dates back hundreds of thousands of years. Archaeological sites reveal blackened stones, charred bones, and ashes that suggest deliberate use rather than accidental burning. Though it is difficult to pinpoint the exact moment when humans first tamed fire, it is clear that by the time of Homo erectus, fire had become a part of daily life. These beings were no longer at the mercy of the elements. They had learned to carry sparks, to maintain embers, and perhaps, eventually, to kindle flames when needed. To sit at the edge of a fire was to sit at the edge of a new world. The first gift of fire was warmth. In open grasslands and cool nights, flames provided shelter from the chill. In colder climates, fire made survival possible, allowing humans to move into regions that would otherwise have been uninhabitable. With fire, the range of human habitation expanded, preparing the way for future migrations across continents. The second gift was protection. Predators that once prowled close now kept their distance, wary of smoke and flame. A circle of firelight became a boundary, a safe zone in which families could rest. But perhaps the most profound gift of fire was its impact on food. Cooking transformed the human diet in ways that reshaped the body itself. Raw meat is tough and difficult to chew. Raw plants often contain fibers and compounds that are hard to digest. By applying heat, early humans softened these foods, broke down complex molecules, and released more energy. What was once tough became tender. What was once indigestible became nourishing. Fire turned food into fuel more efficiently than teeth and stomachs could manage on their own. The consequences of this transformation rippled through human evolution. Teeth became smaller, jaws less pronounced. The digestive tract shortened, as less energy was required to process food. The energy saved in digestion became available for other uses, most notably the growth of the brain. In this way, cooking may have directly fueled the expansion of human intelligence. Each meal by the fire was not only nourishment for the body but also an investment in the mind, allowing greater complexity of thought and culture. Cooking also reshaped the rhythms of daily life. To prepare food meant gathering fuel, tending flames, and waiting patiently as meals cooked. Fire required attention and cooperation. It could not be left unattended for long, lest it burn out. This necessity likely deepened social bonds. Families gathered around flames, sharing warmth, sharing tasks, and sharing meals. In this way, fire became not only a tool of survival but a center of community. Even today, the glow of a campfire, the hearth in a home, or the shared table at a meal carries echoes of this ancient gathering place. The presence of fire altered sleep as well. For countless animals, night is a time of danger, when predators move unseen and darkness hides threats. For humans, fire extended the day. It cast light into the night, allowing activities after sunset. Stories could be told, tools repaired, bonds strengthened in the quiet hours. Fire gave humans mastery over time, no longer bound to the cycle of daylight alone. This extension of waking hours may have nurtured imagination, language, and the earliest forms of culture, whispered and shared in the glow of embers. Food prepared by fire also encouraged variety. Roots and tubers, once too tough to eat raw, became staples. Grains, once hard and bitter, could be roasted or boiled into more digestible forms. Meat could be cooked thoroughly, reducing parasites and diseases that plagued raw diets. The safety of cooked food meant greater survival for groups, fewer illnesses, and more reliable nourishment. In this way, fire improved not only the body's efficiency, but also its resilience. Yet, as with all evolutionary gifts, fire carried its own challenges. The need to maintain flames tied groups to certain places, at least temporarily. Fuel had to be gathered, sometimes in great quantities, demanding effort and planning. Fires could escape and cause destruction. Smoke could irritate eyes and lungs. The dependency on fire, once established, meant that its absence became a hardship, but the benefits far outweighed the costs. The balance between risk and reward tipped heavily in favor of keeping the flame alive. The symbolism of fire also grew alongside its practical uses. Though this development belongs more to culture than to biology, it is worth noting how deeply fire became intertwined with the human imagination. Flames represented power, transformation, and continuity. They consumed and renewed, destroyed and created. To carry a torch from one place to another was not only to carry light, but to carry continuity, the survival of one day into the next. Fire became a metaphor as much as a tool, a symbol that burned brightly in the minds of those who tended it. In considering fire and food, we see how a simple element reshaped the human body and spirit. It altered anatomy, shrinking teeth and jaws, fueling the growth of the brain. It changed society, encouraging cooperation, patience, and shared living. It redefined survival, opening new diets, new environments, and new rhythms of life. The glow of fire was not only warmth against the cold, but a light that illuminated the path forward for humanity. Even now, we are carrying forward this ancient practice. Whether over open flames or in modern stoves, the act is the same: applying heat to transform food into sustenance, to release hidden energy, to nourish the body and the mind. Each meal links us to the countless generations who sat by fires in caves, on plains, and in forests, tending flames that connected them to survival and to one another. The fire burns still, not only in the hearths of homes, but in the memory of the human body itself, in the adaptations that it shaped, and in the culture it inspired. The mastery of fire was not merely a discovery. It was a partnership. Humans learned to tend it, and in return, it reshaped humanity. It is a reminder that evolution is not only about the body adapting to the world, but also about the body adapting to the tools and technologies it creates. Fire is both natural and human, both ancient and enduring. In its light, the human story took a new direction, one that continues to glow in the quiet presence of every flame. 10. The expanding brain. Among the many transformations that marked the path of human evolution, few are as striking or as significant as the expansion of the brain. This single adaptation reshaped not only the body but also the very nature of existence. It gave rise to language, imagination, memory, and the ability to plan for futures not yet seen. It allowed humans to make tools, form communities, and eventually create art, culture, and civilization. To reflect on the expanding brain is to reflect on the core of what makes humanity unique. For within the folds of this organ lies the record of our journey from simple survival to complex thought. The brains of the earliest hominins were not dramatically larger than those of chimpanzees or gorillas. They measured only a few hundred cubic centimeters, sufficient for navigating life in forests and savannas, but limited in capacity. Over millions of years, however, brains grew steadily. By the time of Homo erectus, around 2 million years ago, brain size had nearly doubled. This expansion did not happen in a single leap, but in gradual stages, each generation carrying forward subtle increases that together created a remarkable trajectory. The modern human brain averages around 1,300 to 1,400 cubic centimeters, nearly 3 times the size of that of our closest living relatives. Size alone does not explain the significance of this growth. What mattered most was not just how large the brain became, but how it was organized. In humans, the neocortex, the outer layer of the brain, responsible for higher functions like reasoning, planning, and abstract thought, expanded dramatically. This allowed for more complex patterns of thinking, more intricate social interactions, and the ability to imagine scenarios beyond immediate experience. The frontal lobes, in particular, grew in importance, guiding decision-making, self-control, and foresight. Within these changes lay the seeds of language, art, and the structures of society. The expansion of the brain came with costs. Larger brains required more energy to sustain, consuming nearly a fifth of the body's daily caloric intake. To support this demand, changes in diet became essential. The mastery of fire and the cooking of food, which softened and unlocked more calories, likely provided the necessary fuel. Meat, rich in protein and fat, became a more prominent part of the diet, supplementing the plant-based foods that earlier ancestors relied upon. The evolution of the human brain was therefore closely tied to the evolution of food practices. Without sufficient energy, such growth would have been impossible. The growing brain also reshaped the body in other ways. A larger skull required adjustments in the pelvis and birth process, leading to the challenges of childbirth that remain today. Human infants are born relatively underdeveloped compared to other primates, their brains not yet fully matured, so that their large heads can pass through the birth canal. This created a long period of dependence in infancy, but it also fostered deep bonds between parents and children, as well as cooperative care within groups. The helplessness of infants became a strength, encouraging social structures that supported survival. In this way, the expansion of the brain was not just an individual adaptation, but a social one, shaping the very fabric of human life. With a larger brain came new abilities. Memory extended beyond immediate needs, allowing the storage of experiences that could guide future choices. Problem-solving became more sophisticated, enabling humans to adapt to diverse environments. Symbolic thought emerged, allowing objects, sounds, or gestures to represent concepts. This capacity for symbolism is at the heart of language. Words are symbols, sounds that stand for things not physically present. To invent and share such symbols requires a brain capable of abstraction, and in this ability, humans found a way to coordinate, to teach, to imagine together. The brain also allowed for imagination itself, the ability to picture what does not yet exist. A sharp stone could be envisioned not only as it was, but as what it might become: a tool, a weapon, an instrument of art. A stretch of land could be seen not only as it is, but as it could be: a home, a garden, a place of gathering. This capacity to imagine opened doors that no other animal had walked through, leading to innovations that reshaped both environment and culture. Social life, too, became more complex under the influence of a growing brain. The ability to understand the emotions and intentions of others, sometimes called theory of mind, is rooted in advanced brain function. This allowed for cooperation, alliance, and empathy. It also introduced the possibility of deception, competition, and strategy. Human societies became intricate, balancing cooperation with conflict, guided by an ever-growing web of social bonds. The brain was not only an organ of thought, but an organ of relationship, shaping how groups lived and thrived together. Art and symbolic expression appeared as further signs of the brain's expansion. Cave paintings, carved figures, and musical instruments are traces of a mind that could look beyond the present moment and create something enduring. Such expressions are not necessary for survival in the strictest sense, yet they reflect the fullness of human life. They show that the brain, once enlarged, did more than solve problems. It created beauty, meaning, and memory. It allowed humans to imagine themselves in relation to the cosmos, to tell stories of origins, to ask questions about existence. These are not biological necessities, but they are deeply human. The expanding brain also brought self-awareness. Humans began to recognize themselves as individuals, distinct from others, capable of reflection on past and future. With self-awareness came questions, fears, and aspirations. It brought not only the capacity for joy and creativity, but also the awareness of mortality. The brain made humans not only more capable but also more contemplative. In its folds lay both the triumphs and the anxieties of human life. Even now, the brain remains a frontier of mystery. Though we understand much about its structure and function, its full capacities are still unfolding. Each thought, each dream, each act of creation is a continuation of the evolutionary story that began millions of years ago. To hold this in mind is to recognize that the human brain is not just an organ of the body, but a living archive of our history, a reflection of the countless generations that shaped it. The expansion of the brain was not inevitable, nor was it predetermined. It was one path among many, one outcome of evolutionary pressures and opportunities. Yet once it began, it set in motion a cascade of changes that altered everything. The brain became the source of humanity's distinctiveness, enabling culture, technology, and imagination. It is both fragile and powerful, vulnerable to injury yet capable of wonders. To reflect on it is to reflect on the essence of what it means to be human. And so, as we continue the story of the human body, we carry with us the awareness that the brain is not only an adaptation but a gift, both demanding and transformative. It is the reason we can tell stories of our own evolution, the reason we can imagine past and future, the reason we can reflect quietly on what it means to exist. In the stillness of thought, the legacy of this long expansion, a legacy that continues in every moment we think, feel, or dream. 11. The face and voice. Among the many features that set humans apart from other creatures, the face and the voice hold a special place. They are the instruments through which we connect, express, and share our inner lives with one another. A glance, a smile, a raised brow, or a spoken word carries meaning that bridges the space between individuals. The human face is not just flesh and bone, but a canvas of emotion, and the voice is not merely sound, but a vessel of thought. The story of how these features evolved is deeply tied to our journey from primates to humans, and their transformation reveals much about what it means to be human. The face, in its earliest forms, was shaped primarily for function. In primates, strong jaws and large teeth were essential for grinding plant material or tearing tough foods. The faces of chimpanzees and gorillas project forward, with powerful muscles attached to their jaws for chewing. Early hominins shared many of these traits. They possessed large molars, wide jaws, and robust facial bones. These adaptations reflected the diets of their environments, which often required processing fibrous plants and roots. Over time, however, as fire and tools reshaped the human diet, the demands on the jaw lessened. Teeth became smaller, jaws grew less pronounced, and the face began to flatten. These shifts were not merely cosmetic. They opened space for other changes, including the refinement of vocal structures that would later give rise to speech. As the jaw receded and the face flattened, new possibilities for expression emerged. The muscles of the face became more versatile, capable of subtle movements that conveyed emotion and intent. A lifted eyebrow could signal surprise or skepticism. A frown could reveal concern. A smile could indicate reassurance or joy. Unlike many animals, whose expressions are limited to a few basic signals, humans developed a wide range of facial expressions, finely tuned for social interaction. This flexibility allowed individuals to communicate silently, to share feelings without words, to navigate the complex dynamics of group living. The eyes became central to this new form of communication. Human eyes are unique in the animal kingdom for the stark contrast between the white sclera and the dark iris. This contrast makes it easy to follow the direction of another's gaze. In this simple feature lies a profound advantage. To know what another is looking at is to share attention, to coordinate actions, and to understand intentions. A glance toward danger could warn a group without a sound. A look toward food could guide companions to a meal. Over time, this ability to share attention through the eyes deepened cooperation and strengthened bonds. The human face thus became a living screen of emotion and intent, a reflection of the mind visible to others. Yet the face alone was not enough. Expression needed to be paired with sound. And here the human voice emerged as another great adaptation. In many primates, vocalizations are limited to calls, cries, and hoots, effective for signaling but not for building complex language. The human voice, however, evolved into something far more versatile. This transformation was made possible by subtle changes in anatomy. The larynx, or voice box, descended lower in the throat, enlarging the vocal tract and expanding the range of possible sounds. The tongue became more flexible, capable of shaping these sounds with precision. The lips and teeth contributed to articulation, refining the raw vibrations of the vocal cords into distinct syllables. These changes allowed humans to produce an astonishing variety of sounds. With them came the possibility of language, of creating systems of symbols to represent the world. Words could name objects, describe actions, and express ideas. They could recall the past, plan the future, or imagine what might never be. Language became the great amplifier of human intelligence, allowing knowledge to be shared, stories to be told, and cultures to be built. The voice, once just a call in the forest, became the medium of thought itself, carrying imagination from one mind to another. The evolution of voice and face was inseparable from the expansion of the brain. To control the fine muscles of the face and the vocal tract required intricate neural coordination. To interpret expressions and words required advanced processing in the brain's language and social centers. The growth of the brain and the refinement of the face and voice advanced together, each supporting the other. This partnership gave humans the ability to live not only in physical environments, but also in environments of meaning worlds, shaped by shared symbols, stories, and emotions. The voice also transformed social life. It allowed groups to coordinate hunts, to plan migrations, to settle disputes, and to share knowledge of plants, animals, and tools. It enabled rituals, songs, and prayers, binding communities together with shared sound. Around fires at night, the voice carried myths that explained the world, songs that celebrated life, and lessons that guided the young. The voice extended memory beyond the individual, storing it in the collective mind of the group. Each spoken word was a thread, weaving individuals into the fabric of community. At the same time, the face became the mirror of the inner life. It revealed emotions too complex to be hidden, fostering empathy and trust. The ability to read another's expression, to sense sadness, joy, anger, or fear, deepened relationships and allowed for cooperation on an unprecedented scale. Humans became, in a sense, transparent to one another. The face showed what words could not, and the combination of face and voice created layers of meaning that no other animal could match. There were costs to these changes as well. The lowered larynx, while allowing a greater range of sounds, also made humans more vulnerable to choking. The smaller jaws and teeth, while sufficient for cooked foods, became more prone to crowding and misalignment. These difficulties were part of the compromises of evolution, the trade-offs that accompanied new abilities. Yet the benefits outweighed the costs, for the face and voice transformed human life in ways that no other adaptation had. To consider the human face and voice is to see not only biology, but also identity. Faces are unique, individual, instantly recognizable. They are the maps by which we know one another. The voice, too, carries individuality, each one distinct in tone, rhythm, and resonance. Together, they make each person both part of humanity and yet singular, both connected and unique. They are the instruments through which we become known to others and through which we know ourselves. Even now, When we speak, smile, or share a look, we are carrying forward the legacy of these adaptations. Every conversation, every shared gaze, every moment of expression is rooted in millions of years of evolution. The face and the voice, once simple instruments of eating and calling, have become the foundations of human connection, shaping relationships, culture, and civilization. They remind us that humanity is not only about survival but about communication, not only about existence but about meaning. And so, in the gentle unfolding of our story, the evolution of the face and voice stands as one of the most profound chapters. It is the chapter in which expression became language, in which gaze became shared attention, in which sound became thought, made audible. It is the chapter in which humans began not only to live but to speak, to sing, to smile, and to share their inner worlds with one another. In the face and the voice, we see the human spirit reflected, and we hear it carried on the air. 12. Social bonds and cooperation. In the long unfolding of human evolution, it was not only the body that changed, but also the patterns of life that held groups together. Humans are social beings to a degree unmatched by most other animals. Our survival has never depended solely on individual strength or cleverness, but on the bonds formed between companions, families, and communities. To understand the evolution of the human body, we must also reflect on the social context that shaped it, for cooperation, care, and shared living played as crucial a role as bones and muscles. The human body is a body made for connection, one whose adaptations reflect the needs of a species that thrives not alone, but together. The roots of cooperation lie deep in our primate ancestry. Monkeys and apes already lived in groups where grooming, alliances, and mutual defense were essential. For them, the group offered protection against predators, access to mates, and stability in raising young. Early hominins inherited these tendencies, but as their lives shifted from forests to open savannas, the demands of cooperation grew stronger. On the plains, the threats were greater and the resources more scattered. To survive meant to work together more closely, to watch over one another, to share the burdens of finding food, defending against predators, and caring for the young. One of the most striking features of humans is the long dependency of infants. Because of the large size of the brain, babies are born in a relatively helpless state, unable to walk or feed themselves for years. This prolonged childhood is unusual among mammals, and it demanded cooperation beyond the immediate bond of mother and child. Fathers, siblings, grandparents, and other members of the group often took part in caring for infants, carrying them, feeding them, and protecting them. This pattern, known as cooperative breeding, strengthened bonds within groups and encouraged the development of empathy and shared responsibility. The helplessness of infants, far from being a weakness, became a source of social cohesion, binding groups together through care. Cooperation also revealed itself in hunting and foraging. While many animals foraged together, early humans relied on strategies that required coordination and trust. Groups could work together to encircle prey, to drive animals toward traps, or to share the fruits of a successful hunt. Foraging for plants, roots, and fruits was also often done in groups, with knowledge of seasonal resources shared across generations. The act of sharing food reinforced bonds, creating expectations of reciprocity and fairness that became the roots of moral behavior. To refuse to share was to weaken the group. To give generously was to strengthen it. The human body itself reflects this cooperative way of life. Our voices, shaped for speech, made it possible to coordinate actions in real time, to warn of danger, to plan hunts, and to comfort children. Our faces, with their expressive muscles, made it possible to signal intent and emotion, building trust through transparency. The whites of the eyes, visible even at a distance, allowed gaze following, enabling groups to focus attention together. These traits may seem simple, but they are the foundations of cooperation, making it possible for groups of humans to act with a unity rare among animals. Cooperation extended beyond immediate survival into the realm of memory and teaching. Knowledge of edible plants, safe paths, hunting techniques, and tool making was not held by individuals alone but was shared and transmitted. Teaching, whether through demonstration or imitation, became a hallmark of humanity. This sharing of knowledge across generations allowed human culture to accumulate. Each new generation, building upon the wisdom of the last, the body, with its dexterous hands and articulate voice, became a vehicle for this teaching, passing knowledge not through instinct, but through deliberate guidance. The emotional life of humans also reflects the importance of cooperation. Empathy, the ability to feel with another, likely developed as an extension of the need to care for helpless infants and to cooperate in groups. To sense another's pain, fear, or joy became advantageous, strengthening bonds and guiding behavior. Laughter, touch, and song all emerged as ways of reinforcing group unity, soothing tensions, and celebrating togetherness. These behaviors were not luxuries but vital elements of survival. A group that laughed together, that comforted one another, that grieved together, was a group bound more tightly and better able to endure hardships. The costs of living socially were real. Conflict, competition, rivalry often threatened the harmony of groups. Yet even here, the body and mind developed strategies to mitigate discord. Expressions of submission, gestures of reconciliation, and rituals of bonding all evolved to keep peace within communities. Humans became experts in negotiation, in balancing self-interest with group welfare, in building alliances that could shift and adapt as circumstances changed. This fluidity, this capacity to manage conflict within cooperation, became one of humanity's greatest strengths. Cooperation also allowed humans to take risks that individuals could not face alone. Hunting large animals, migrating across new landscapes, or enduring harsh climates required the pooled efforts of many. Groups that cooperated were able to tackle challenges far beyond the capacity of individuals. Over time, this ability to act together reshaped human identity. People came to see themselves not as isolated beings, but as members of a community, defined as much by their relationships as by their individual traits. The human self became a social self, rooted in bonds of family, friendship, and group belonging. Even today, the traces of this evolutionary past are evident. The joy of companionship, the pain of loneliness, the desire to belong. These emotions are not accidents of culture, but the echoes of survival strategies honed over millions of years. Our bodies carry the imprints of cooperation, the voice that speaks, the eyes that meet, the hands that share. Our minds carry the habits of empathy, trust, and reciprocity. To be human is to be social, and our survival has always depended on our ability to live and work together. As we reflect on social bonds and cooperation, we see that the human body is not simply an individual instrument, but part of a larger network. Every smile, every word, every shared meal is part of this ongoing pattern. The bonds that hold us together are as much a part of our biology as bones and muscles. They shaped our evolution just as surely as upright walking or expanding brains. To understand the human body, we must understand the communities that gave it meaning, for it was within groups that humanity found its strength. And so, in the unfolding story of evolution, cooperation stands as one of the most powerful forces. It turned helpless infants into the center of communities. It turned foraging into shared sustenance. It turned survival into culture, memory, and belonging. The human body, in its every feature, is a social body, adapted not for solitude, but for connection. To reflect on this is to recognize that we are, in the deepest sense, made for one another. 13. Migration across the globe. The story of humanity is not only one of bodies adapting to new forms, but also one of journeys. From their earliest beginnings in Africa, humans have always been wanderers. Movement has defined us, not only in physical steps across landscapes, but in the expansion of imagination, culture, and possibility. Migration is written into our bones and our histories, and it is through these great movements across the globe that humans became the species we recognize today. To reflect on migration is to trace the pathways of survival, the branching routes that carried small groups outward until they filled nearly every corner of the earth. For millions of years, the ancestors of humans lived only in Africa. It was here that bipedalism first took hold, where brains began to expand, where the first tools were struck from stone, and where fire began to be tamed. Africa was the cradle, nurturing generations of hominins in its forests, grasslands, and river valleys. But the same traits that helped survival, upright walking, clever hands, cooperative bonds, also made movement possible. Early humans were not bound to one place. They could adapt to many environments, shifting their diets, tools, and behaviors as climates changed. The earliest known migrations beyond Africa are attributed to Homo erectus, nearly 2 million years ago. Fossil and archaeological evidence reveals their presence in Asia and Europe, from the island of Java in Indonesia to the plains of China and the valleys of Georgia. This was the first great wave outward, long before modern humans appeared. Homo erectus carried with them tools, fire, and social living, surviving in diverse conditions far from their original home. Though these early migrants were not our direct ancestors in every case, they demonstrated what was possible, that humans could spread across continents, adapting to new lands with resilience and ingenuity. Much later, around 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, modern humans, arose in Africa. For tens of thousands of years, they lived there exclusively, developing more refined tools, more complex social structures, and the beginnings of symbolic expression. Then, somewhere between 60,000 and 70,000 years ago, a small group began the journey outward. This migration, sometimes called the Great Dispersal, would eventually populate the entire planet. It did not happen all at once, but in waves, with groups moving slowly across landscapes, settling, adapting, and continuing onward. The routes of migration followed the geography of the world. Some groups traveled north into the Middle East, then west into Europe and east into Asia. Others hugged the coastlines, moving through India and Southeast Asia, eventually reaching Australia more than 40,000 years ago. Later migrations crossed into Europe, where humans encountered Neanderthals, and into northern Asia, where they adapted to cold climates. Around 15,000 years ago, humans crossed into the Americas, likely following herds across a land bridge that once connected Siberia and Alaska. Within a few thousand years, they spread from the Arctic tundra to the southern tip of South America, filling new worlds with life and culture. Every migration carried challenges. The climates varied drastically, from ice-covered landscapes to humid forests, from deserts to high mountains. Yet humans adapted through both body and culture. In colder regions, clothing and shelters became essential, and bodies developed stockier builds to conserve heat. In sunnier climates, skin tones darkened to protect against ultraviolet rays. In higher altitudes, lungs and blood adapted to thinner air. Each group of migrants became shaped by the land they inhabited, their bodies reflecting the dialogue between biology and environment. Migration also brought encounters with other human species. In Europe and Asia, Homo sapiens met Neanderthals and Denisovans, close relatives with their own long histories. These encounters were not only competition but also interconnection. Genetic evidence shows that modern humans carry traces of these other lineages within their DNA, a reminder that migration was not just a story of separation but also of blending. The human family tree is not a straight line but a web, woven from many strands that met, parted, and sometimes intertwined again. The movement of humans across the globe also transformed culture. Each new land offered new resources, new challenges, and new inspirations. Tools were adapted to local needs, from bone harpoons in coastal areas to spears designed for hunting mammoths on icy plains. Art flourished in different forms, from the cave paintings of Europe to the rock carvings of Africa and Australia. Stories and rituals developed that connected people to the landscapes they inhabited, weaving meaning into migration. In this way, the journey outward was not only physical but also cultural, shaping the diversity of human traditions that exist today. It is worth reflecting on how migration shaped the human spirit. To set out into the unknown requires curiosity, resilience, and cooperation. Groups that survived did so by trusting one another, sharing resources, and facing dangers together. The urge to explore, to move beyond the familiar horizon, became part of what it meant to be human. This spirit did not end when the continents were filled. It carried into the building of ships that crossed oceans, into the creation of maps that charted the world, and even into the launch of spacecraft that reached beyond the Earth itself. Migration, in this sense, is not only a biological adaptation, but a defining trait of the human soul. Every step of this journey left traces in the human body: the color of our skin, the shapes of our noses, the builds of our bodies. These are not arbitrary differences, but adaptations to the lands our ancestors traveled through. Diversity is the record of migration, written into our very being. It reminds us that humanity is not one story but many, woven together through movement, meeting, and adaptation. Today, when we think of humanity as a global species, we are seeing the culmination of these long journeys, from small groups in Africa to billions spread across the world. The story of migration is the story of how we became a species without borders, capable of inhabiting deserts, forests, mountains, islands, and ice. The landscapes may differ, but the thread that connects us all is the shared journey outward from our ancient home. And so, as we reflect on migration across the globe, we see not only the physical steps of our ancestors, but also the symbolic steps of humanity itself. To move, to adapt, to explore, these are woven into the essence of who we are. Our bodies carry the imprint of these journeys. Our cultures carry their stories. And our spirit carries the same quiet urge to see what lies beyond the next horizon. Migration is not only our past, but also our ongoing nature. A gentle reminder that we are, and have always been, travelers across the earth. 14. Adaptations to climate. As humans spread outward from their original home in Africa, they encountered environments that were vastly different from the ones their earliest ancestors had known. Some groups moved into frozen tundras where winters stretched long and bitterly cold. Others settled in dense rainforests, dripping with humidity and shade. Still others crossed deserts, where survival depended on endurance beneath scorching suns. Each of these landscapes presented challenges to the human body, and though culture, tools, and fire played critical roles in survival, the body itself also adapted. Over thousands of years, these adaptations to climate shaped the diversity of humanity, leaving behind traces still visible in our forms today. One of the most striking adaptations was skin color. The earliest humans, living in the intense equatorial sun of Africa, possessed dark skin rich in melanin. Melanin acted as a natural shield, protecting against ultraviolet radiation, which can damage DNA and strip away folate, a vitamin crucial for reproduction and development. Dark skin, therefore, was not only a safeguard against disease, but also an essential adaptation for survival in bright, sunlit climates. As humans migrated into regions with weaker sunlight, the balance shifted. Lighter skin evolved in northern populations, allowing more efficient production of vitamin D in conditions where sunshine was scarce. This delicate balance between protection and production shaped a spectrum of skin tones across the globe, each finely tuned to local conditions. Body shape also responded to climate. In colder regions, where retaining heat was vital, bodies tended to become shorter and stockier, with shorter limbs that conserved warmth. In hotter climates, bodies became leaner and taller, with longer limbs that helped release heat more efficiently. This principle, known as Bergmann's and Allen's rules, is still evident when we compare populations across latitudes. The differences are not about superiority or inferiority, but about adaptation, the quiet shaping of bodies to fit the demands of the environment. The respiratory system also adjusted to climate. In cold and dry regions, noses grew narrower and longer, helping to warm and humidify air before it reached the lungs. In warmer, more humid regions, broader noses sufficed, allowing for easier breathing without the need for warming. These subtle shifts in facial structure, repeated across countless generations, reflected the simple necessity of breathing comfortably in varied environments. They remind us that even features we rarely think about, like the shape of a nose, are the products of ancient conversations between body and climate. Endurance itself became an adaptation. Humans are remarkable among animals for their ability to run long distances. Unlike many creatures that sprint briefly, humans can sustain running for hours under the right conditions. This trait, known as persistence hunting, may have been especially useful in hot climates, where humans, through sweating and upright posture, could outlast prey animals that overheated in the sunday. The ability to sweat efficiently, regulating body temperature during exertion, gave humans a unique advantage. In colder regions, by contrast, adaptations leaned more toward conserving heat through body fat and layered clothing, aided by fire and shelter. Altitude posed its own challenges. In high mountains, where oxygen is thin, the human body faced the threat of hypoxia, a lack of sufficient oxygen for normal function. Populations that settled in such environments developed adaptations that improved oxygen uptake and circulation. In the Andes, for example, people evolved larger lung capacities and higher concentrations of hemoglobin in their blood. In the Himalayas, populations developed different strategies, including more efficient oxygen use at the cellular level. These adaptations demonstrate the flexibility of human physiology, its ability to meet even the demands of thin air. Diet, too, was influenced by climate. In Arctic regions, where plant foods were scarce, diets centered on fish and animal fats, providing not only energy but also insulation against the cold. In tropical forests, diets remained rich in fruits, tubers, and varied plant foods, reflecting the abundance of vegetation. These dietary differences, in turn, influenced the body. The development of lactose tolerance in some populations, allowing adults to digest milk, arose in regions where herding and dairying became central to survival. This is another example of culture and climate working together to shape the human body in lasting ways. Clothing and shelter eventually expanded the range of environments humans could inhabit. But even with these cultural innovations, the body continued to adapt. The capacity for fat storage, for instance, became important in regions with seasonal scarcity, allowing people to endure times of famine. Variations in metabolism reflect the needs of different environments, whether to conserve energy in cold or to regulate it in heat. In this way, biology and culture work together, weaving resilience into the fabric of humanity. It is important to see these adaptations not as divisions, but as variations of the same human story. The differences in skin, body shape, or facial features are not signs of separation but of connection to the environments our ancestors inhabited. They are the fingerprints of climate on the human form, subtle and beautiful reminders that we are all products of survival in different corners of the earth. No feature is more or less human. All are expressions of the same capacity for adaptation. Migration and adaptation also deepened diversity. As humans moved into new regions, isolated groups developed unique traits over generations. When groups later reconnected through trade, travel, or marriage, these traits blended, creating even greater diversity. In this way, the human body became a living record of journeys and environments, a map inscribed in skin, bone, and breath. Each adaptation was local and specific, yet together they formed a global tapestry, a testament to humanity's shared yet varied path. The story of climate and adaptation also reminds us of resilience. Humans are not the strongest animals, nor the fastest, nor the largest, yet we are among the most adaptable. From icy tundras to sweltering deserts, from humid forests to thin mountain air, humans have found ways to endure. This adaptability is not only a triumph of biology, but of cooperation and culture. For without fire, shelter, and shared knowledge, the body alone could not have survived. Still, the body's adjustments, its skin, lungs, noses, and builds reveal how deeply climate has been woven into human existence. Even now, when modern technology shields us from many environmental extremes, the traces of these adaptations remain. They are visible in the mirror, in the diversity of faces and forms that reflect the journeys of ancestors across time and space. They are reminders that humanity is one species, shaped by many environments, connected not despite our differences but because of them. To honor this diversity is to honor the long history of adaptation that allowed humanity to fill the earth. And so, in the quiet reflection of this chapter, we see the human body as a canvas, painted by climate. Each shade of skin, each curve of body, each breath at high altitude is a brushstroke in the larger picture of survival. It is a picture not of separation but of unity. For all these adaptations are part of the same story, the story of a species that journeyed outward and met the world with resilience. To see this is to see humanity as both diverse and deeply connected, a single family shaped by the many climates of the earth. 15. Symbolic thought and culture. The human story is not only about bones, muscles, and adaptations to climate. It is also about the inner world, the ability to think in symbols, to imagine what is not present, and to create culture that carries meaning across generations. Symbolic thought is the foundation of language, art, ritual, and belief. It is what allows a sound to stand for an object, a shape on a wall to represent an animal, or a gesture to carry a message beyond itself. Culture, in turn, is the weaving together of these symbols into shared practices, stories, and traditions. To understand what makes us human, we must pause to reflect on how symbolic thought and culture emerged from the growing brain and the social bonds of our ancestors. The roots of symbolic thought lie deep in the capacity for abstraction. Many animals can learn, remember, and even use simple tools. Some can communicate through calls and signals, but humans took these abilities further. They began to associate sounds with specific meanings, to use one thing to represent another. This was not only a practical skill but also a mental leap, the ability to live in a world of representations as well as in the immediate physical world. When a word could stand for an object or a painted image for an idea, humans stepped into a new dimension of existence. Evidence of early symbolic behavior appears in archaeological traces. Beads made from shells, ochre pigments used for coloring, and carvings etched into bone or stone suggest that humans were engaging in symbolic expression tens of thousands of years ago. These objects served no direct survival function. They were not tools for hunting or cooking, but items of meaning, likely worn as ornaments, used in rituals, or shared as markers of identity. Such artifacts reveal that early humans were not only concerned with the immediate necessities of life, but also with belonging, status, beauty, and memory. Cave art offers some of the most moving glimpses into the dawn of symbolic thought. In deep caverns across Europe and beyond, images of animals, handprints, and abstract shapes adorn the walls. Painted with natural pigments and often placed in locations far from daily life, these works suggest ritual and imagination. They show that early humans not only saw the world around them, but sought to capture it, to recreate it in image, to carry its meaning into a different realm. A painting of a bison is not a bison, yet it allows the mind to hold and share the concept of the animal. In this act of representation lies the essence of symbolic thought. Language itself is the greatest expression of this capacity. Words are symbols, sounds that stand for things, actions, or ideas. Through language, humans could coordinate with precision, teach skills, tell stories, and share dreams. Language allowed knowledge to accumulate across generations, freeing it from the limits of memory alone. A story told by one generation could shape the actions of another, long after the original speaker was gone. In this way, culture became possible, the storage of knowledge, values, and meanings in shared symbols carried forward by communities. The rise of symbolic thought also reshaped social life. Symbols could mark identity, distinguishing one group from another. They could create shared rituals, binding communities together through common practices. They could explain natural events, offering myths and beliefs that provided comfort, order, and meaning. While the details of these early cultures remain hidden to us, the traces suggest that humans were already living in symbolic worlds long before the first cities or civilizations arose. The human body itself reflects the importance of symbolic thought. The voice, capable of shaping countless sounds, became the instrument of language. The hands, skilled in precision, became tools for painting, carving, and crafting symbols. The brain, with its expanded neocortex, became the space where imagination and abstraction could flourish. Every part of the body worked in harmony to create and share meaning. In this way, symbolic thought was not separate from biology but an extension of it, an unfolding of the capacities already present in the human form. Culture also influenced survival in profound ways. Groups, with shared knowledge and rituals, were more cohesive, better able to cooperate and endure hardship. Shared beliefs and practices created trust, reduced conflict, and encouraged sacrifice for the good of the group. Symbols allowed humans to create imagined communities larger than immediate families, connecting strangers through shared stories, totems, or rituals. This ability to unite through symbols became one of humanity's most powerful strengths, enabling large groups to work together toward common goals. Yet symbolic thought also carried new complexities. It introduced the possibility of misunderstanding, of symbols interpreted in different ways. It created hierarchies, as certain symbols became markers of authority or status. It introduced abstract fears and hopes, such as thoughts of death or the afterlife, that could weigh heavily on the mind. These challenges were part of the expansion of consciousness, part of the cost of living in a symbolic world. Still, the benefits, the richness of culture, the depth of imagination, the strength of community outweighed the burdens. The legacy of symbolic thought is everywhere in human life. It is in the stories we tell, the art we create, the rituals we perform, and the languages we speak. It is in the flags, songs, and traditions that unite communities, and in the personal symbols we carry within ourselves, memories, beliefs, dreams. It is what allows us to live not only in the present moment, but in worlds of meaning that stretch across time and space. When we reflect on this chapter of evolution, we see that humanity did not simply adapt to environments with bodies alone. We adapted with symbols, creating shared worlds that guided behavior, shaped identity, and carried knowledge. Culture became as vital to survival as food or shelter, for it gave structure to life, meaning to hardship, and direction to action. To be human is not only to walk upright or to cook food, but to live in worlds of meaning, to imagine, to symbolize, to create culture. And so, in the quiet unfolding of our story, the rise of symbolic thought marks a profound turning point. It is the chapter in which humans began to live in two worlds at once: the physical world of nature and the symbolic world of culture. These worlds remain intertwined, shaping one another, carried forward in every word we speak, every story we tell, every gesture we make. The ability to create symbols is the ability to carry the invisible into the visible, to give form to thought, to make the imagined real. In this, we find not only survival, but the essence of humanity. 16. Agriculture and settled life. For most of human history, our ancestors lived as foragers, moving across landscapes in search of food, following the rhythms of seasons, and relying on the cooperation of small groups. They hunted animals, gathered fruits and roots, fished rivers, and adapted to what the land provided. This way of life endured for tens of thousands of years and shaped much of the human body and mind. Yet around 12,000 years ago, in scattered parts of the world, a profound shift occurred. Humans began to cultivate plants and domesticate animals, setting in motion the age of agriculture. This transition, though gradual and varied, marked one of the most transformative chapters in human history. It reshaped the body, altered communities, and gave rise to settled life. The beginnings of agriculture are found in different regions, each experimenting with its own plants and animals. In the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, wheat and barley were cultivated, and sheep and goats were domesticated. In East Asia, rice and millet became staples, while pigs and chickens were brought into human care. In the Americas, maize, beans, and squash were cultivated, and llamas and turkeys joined human households. Africa saw the domestication of sorghum and yams, while in New Guinea, taro and bananas became essential crops. This pattern shows that agriculture was not the invention of a single place or people, but a response to broader environmental changes. As climates shifted after the last ice age and fertile lands encouraged cultivation, the shift to farming altered the rhythms of human life. Where once groups moved with herds and seasons, they now began to stay in one place, tending crops, storing food, and building more permanent shelters. Villages grew around fields, and later towns grew around villages. With settled life came new patterns of social organization. Populations increased as food became more reliable, though not always more varied. Specialization of labor appeared, with some tending fields, others crafting tools, and others guiding rituals or coordinating the community. The human world became more complex, layered with roles and responsibilities that had not existed in the same way among foragers. The human body itself was reshaped by agriculture. Diets narrowed in many regions, as people relied heavily on a few staple crops, rather than the diverse foods once gathered in the wild. This led to deficiencies in vitamins and minerals, evident in the bones of early agricultural communities, which show signs of malnutrition and disease. Teeth, once adapted to chewing varied and fibrous foods, began to show more cavities as diets shifted toward starches and sugars. Average stature declined in many populations, a reflection of the health challenges of early farming life. The body, once honed by constant movement and variety, adjusted to the repetitive tasks of planting, harvesting, and grinding grain. At the same time, the work of farming introduced new physical demands. Fields required long hours of labor under the sunday. Grinding grain wore down teeth and strained muscles. Carrying water, herding animals, and building storage structures required endurance. These repetitive tasks left their marks on the skeletons of ancient farmers, showing patterns of wear different from those of hunter-gatherers. The body adapted, but it also bore the costs of this new lifestyle. Agriculture also changed relationships with animals. Domestication was more than keeping creatures nearby. It was a mutual adaptation. Animals grew smaller, more docile, and more dependent on human care. Humans, in turn, gained steady sources of meat, milk, wool, and labor. But living in close contact with animals also brought new challenges, including diseases that could spread between species. Many illnesses that later shaped human history, from smallpox to influenza, originated in this shared living arrangement. The body's immune system, therefore, was pressed to adapt in new ways, balancing the benefits of domestication with its risks. The growth of agriculture allowed surplus food, and surplus food changed everything. With more than enough to survive, some individuals could pursue other tasks, crafting tools, shaping pottery, weaving cloth, or recording marks that would evolve into writing. Leaders and organizers emerged, guiding resources and decisions. With time, hierarchies grew, along with inequalities that were less pronounced in foraging societies. Settled life created wealth but also introduced the challenges of distribution and fairness. Communities became larger, but with size came new tensions. The human body, built for small bands, now lived in dense villages where diseases spread more easily and conflicts required new systems of resolution. Yet agriculture also opened possibilities that foraging could not. Settled life allowed humans to build more permanent homes, to cultivate beauty in pottery, weaving, and art, and to establish rituals tied to the cycles of planting and harvest. Fields became sacred spaces, seasons became calendars, and the turning of the year was marked by sowing and reaping. The rhythms of agriculture were not only physical but cultural, shaping songs, stories, and ceremonies that celebrated the partnership between humans and the land. The body, though bearing the costs of farming, also benefited from stability. Infants had greater chances of survival when food was stored and accessible. Populations grew, and communities expanded into new territories, carrying crops and animals with them. The spread of agriculture was not rapid but gradual, often blending with foraging for centuries, until farming became the dominant way of life. By then, the human body had adjusted once more, showing both the compromises and the advantages of this profound transformation. It is worth reflecting on how agriculture changed the relationship between humans and the earth. Foragers adapted to the landscapes they entered, taking what was available and moving on. Farmers, by contrast, reshaped landscapes, clearing forests, diverting rivers, and planting fields. The body, once shaped only by climate and food, now began to be shaped by the landscapes humans themselves created. The fields and villages became new environments, pressing new demands on the body, while also providing new opportunities for survival and growth. The echoes of this transition remain with us today. Modern bodies still show the marks of agriculture, from the adaptations that allow some populations to digest milk into adulthood to the persistence of diseases that arose in farming communities. The foods we eat, the rituals we follow, the very way we live in permanent homes rather than in constant movement, all reflect this ancient turning point. Agriculture was not simply a new way of getting food. It was the beginning of a new way of being human. And so, in the unfolding story of the human body, agriculture stands as both gift and burden. It brought stability but also strain, abundance but also inequality, permanence but also new vulnerabilities. It reshaped diets, bodies, and societies, weaving humanity more deeply into the fabric of the earth. To reflect on this chapter is to see that the human body is not only a product of nature but also of culture, shaped not only by climate and migration, but by the fields we planted and the animals we raised. In the gentle rhythms of sowing and harvest, in the marks of farming on bones and teeth, we see the next step in the journey of humanity, the step into settled life. 17. The evolution of disease and immunity. The human body has always lived in dialogue with the unseen world of microbes, parasites, and pathogens. From the very beginning, survival depended not only on strength, cleverness, and cooperation, but also on the ability to resist illness. The immune system, with its intricate defenses, has been shaped by countless generations of exposure to disease. At the same time, the environments humans created through migration, agriculture, and settled life introduced new challenges, pushing the body to adapt in ways both subtle and profound. The story of disease and immunity is therefore inseparable from the story of human evolution. It is a story of vulnerability and resilience, of costs and protections written into the very fabric of our bodies. In the earliest stages of human life, before agriculture and settlement, diseases were fewer but still present. Small groups of foragers moved across landscapes, and their mobility prevented many infections from taking hold. Without dense populations, pathogens that required continuous hosts could not survive long. Yet parasites, wounds, and foodborne illnesses were constant companions. Cuts could become infected, water could harbor bacteria, and parasites could burrow beneath skin or enter through food. The immune system, shaped over millions of years, provided defenses, mounting attacks on invaders while remembering them for the future. Even in these small groups, disease was a selective force, favoring bodies that could mount stronger defenses or tolerate infections better. The immune system itself is one of the most remarkable features of the human body. It works through a layered response. The skin, the largest organ, acts as a barrier, while mucous membranes trap pathogens before they enter deeper tissues. When invaders breach these defenses, the body responds with inflammation, fevers, and specialized cells that attack and neutralize the threat. At the same time, memory cells retain information about past infections, ensuring quicker responses in the future. This remarkable system, though invisible in daily life, has been honed by constant exposure to challenges. Each illness faced by an ancestor left its imprint, shaping the defenses we carry today. When humans began to settle into larger groups with the rise of agriculture, disease patterns changed dramatically. Living in close quarters created opportunities for pathogens to spread rapidly. Waste accumulated, contaminating water and food. Domesticated animals became new reservoirs of disease, passing infections that had never before existed in human populations. Many of the world's most persistent diseases, including influenza, tuberculosis, and smallpox, are thought to have originated in the leap from animals to humans. The immune system was pressed to adapt to these new threats, and populations that survived outbreaks passed on genetic traits that improved resistance. Malaria provides a powerful example of this interaction between disease and human evolution. In regions where malaria was common, certain genetic variations offered protection. The sickle cell trait, for instance, alters the shape of red blood cells in a way that makes it harder for malaria parasites to complete their life cycle, while inheriting 2 copies of the trait leads to sickle cell disease. Inheriting 1 copy offers a survival advantage against malaria. This delicate balance illustrates how disease has shaped the human genome, leaving behind traits that carry both costs and benefits. Other adaptations tell similar stories. In Europe, genetic resistance to certain plagues may have influenced survival during the Black Death centuries later. In parts of Africa and Asia, genetic traits evolved to resist intestinal parasites and other local diseases. Even the persistence of lactose tolerance in some populations is linked to disease, as milk provided a safer source of hydration than contaminated water in farming communities. These examples remind us that immunity is not static but dynamic, a conversation between body and environment carried out across generations. The costs of disease were not only physical but social. Epidemics could devastate communities, reshaping populations and altering cultural paths. Families lost members, villages shrank, and migrations were sometimes driven by illness as much as by hunger or conflict. Yet disease also fostered cooperation. The need to care for the sick, to protect infants, and to share healing knowledge strengthened bonds. Rituals of purification, burial, and healing became woven into culture, reflecting humanity's ongoing struggle with illness and the search for meaning in suffering. The relationship between humans and microbes is not only antagonistic. Many bacteria live within the body as allies, aiding digestion, producing vitamins, and defending against harmful invaders. The microbiome, the vast community of microbes within the human body, is itself a product of coevolution. It reminds us that immunity is not simply about resisting disease, but about maintaining balance, living in harmony with beneficial organisms while defending against harmful ones. This balance is delicate, shifting with diet, environment, and lifestyle, but it has always been central to survival. As human populations grew and spread across the globe, diseases traveled with them. Pathogens that once thrived in one region could suddenly devastate another when new groups came into contact. These encounters shaped history, but they also shaped the human body, forcing adaptation in response to new threats. Over time, immunity developed in diverse forms, reflecting the varied landscapes of disease across the world. Each population carried the imprint of the illnesses it had faced, leaving a mosaic of resistances and vulnerabilities within the human species. The story of immunity is also one of memory, both biological and cultural. The immune system remembers pathogens, mounting stronger defenses upon re-exposure. Human cultures, too, remembered patterns of illness, passing down knowledge of remedies, taboos, and practices that reduced risk. Some groups learned to boil water, others developed herbal treatments, and still others wove protective rituals into daily life. These cultural adaptations were as essential as biological ones, forming another layer of defense against disease. Even in the present day, the marks of this evolutionary struggle remain. Our bodies still carry genetic traces of past battles, from resistance traits to vulnerabilities. Our immune systems, complex and powerful, are living archives of the pathogens our ancestors encountered. The diversity of human responses to disease, some more resistant, others more susceptible, reflects the long interplay between illness and adaptation. The scars of past epidemics are not only in history but in blood and bone, woven into who we are. To reflect on the evolution of disease and immunity is to see the human body as part of a wider web of life. We are not separate from microbes and parasites but live in constant interaction with them. Our defenses are not perfect, nor are they static, but they have carried us through countless generations. They remind us of resilience, of the body's ability to adapt and endure even in the face of invisible threats. And so, in the gentle unfolding of our story, disease and immunity emerge not as interruptions but as companions, shaping the path of evolution as surely as climate, migration, or tools. The aches of fever, the resilience of recovery, the memory of illness, these are as much a part of humanity as walking upright or speaking with words. In every heartbeat, in every breath, the immune system works quietly, carrying forward the lessons of ancestors who faced dangers we cannot see. It is a reminder that the human body is both vulnerable and enduring, always adapting, always surviving, always continuing the journey of life. 18. Modern human diversity. As humanity spread across the world, adapting to climates, landscapes, and challenges, The body evolved in subtle but lasting ways. These adaptations, shaped by countless generations of survival, gave rise to the extraordinary diversity we see today. Skin tones, body shapes, hair textures, facial features, and even internal biological traits reflect not separation, but the deep history of a single species meeting different environments. Modern human diversity is not a division but a record, written in bone and skin, of journeys across the globe. To reflect on this diversity is to see the beauty of variation within unity, the many expressions of humanity that arose from one shared origin. At the most visible level, skin color reveals the quiet influence of sunlight on human evolution. Darker skin, rich in melanin, evolved as protection in regions with intense ultraviolet radiation. It safeguarded against DNA damage and preserved folate, essential for reproduction and development. Lighter skin, by contrast, evolved in northern latitudes, where weaker sunlight required more efficient production of vitamin D. Between these extremes lies a spectrum, reflecting not categories but gradients, each shade a response to the balance of sunlight and survival. Skin tone is often the first trait we notice, but in truth, it is only a thin surface adaptation, one of many that mark humanity's shared resilience. Body shapes tell a similar story. Populations in colder regions developed shorter, stockier builds, with compact limbs that conserved heat. In hotter climates, taller, leaner builds with longer limbs helped release heat more efficiently. Differences follow simple rules of physics, shaped by generations of adaptation. They are not rigid, for human bodies remain flexible, but they reveal how environment leaves its mark on form. A body built for warmth in the Arctic differs from one built for endurance in the savanna, yet both are equally human, both equally the result of survival. Facial features also reflect adaptation. The shape of the nose, for example, is influenced by climate. Narrower noses help warm and humidify air in cold, dry regions, while broader noses are more common in warm, humid climates. Eye shapes, hair textures, and even lip forms reflect subtle adjustments to environment and ancestry. These traits, though sometimes emphasized as markers of difference, are in truth variations within a single pattern, shaped by local conditions, but belonging to one species. No trait stands apart from humanity as a whole. All are threads in the same fabric. Hair itself carries stories of adaptation. Tightly curled hair, common in hot climates, may help keep the head cool by creating air circulation close to the scalp, while straighter hair, more frequent in colder climates, may provide warmth by lying closer to the head. Variations in thickness, color, and growth reflect not only climate but also genetic drift, the random fluctuations that occur as small populations migrate and adapt. These details remind us that diversity arises not only from natural selection but also from chance, from the paths taken and the populations that split, moved, and grew. Beyond appearances, internal traits reveal even more about human diversity. In regions where malaria was common, genetic adaptations like the sickle cell trait or other variations provided resistance, even at the cost of potential health problems when inherited in pairs. In populations with long histories of herding, genetic changes allowed adults to digest lactose, the sugar in milk, providing nourishment in times of scarcity. In the Arctic, some populations developed genetic traits that help them metabolize high-fat diets more efficiently. These internal variations are less visible but just as vital, reminders that survival is written not only on the surface but deep within the body. Modern diversity also reflects the mixing of populations. Humans have never been isolated entirely. From the earliest migrations, groups met, intermarried, and blended, sharing genes as well as culture. Even Neanderthals and Denisovans contributed to the genetic makeup of modern humans, leaving small but meaningful traces in our DNA. This blending shows that diversity is not about sharp divisions, but about connections. about lineages that cross and mingle. The differences we see today are the outcome of movement, encounter, and exchange across time. Cultural adaptations also shaped the body. The practice of agriculture introduced new diets and new pressures. In some places, reliance on grains altered dental health and bone growth. In others, the use of fermentation or cooking techniques influenced digestion. Traditions of clothing, shelter, and lifestyle also interacted with biology, reducing or increasing exposure to certain environmental pressures. Human diversity is therefore not only natural but cultural, a reflection of the dialogue between biology and the ways of life humans created. It is important to remember that while diversity is visible and real, the genetic differences between populations are remarkably small. Humans share over 99.9% of their DNA, a testament to our recent common origin. The variations that exist, though meaningful, are minor compared to the vast differences that can exist between individuals of other species. This genetic closeness is why humans, wherever they are found, can intermarry, reproduce, and share in the same story. The body's diversity is a surface expression of deeper unity. The history of modern human diversity also carries lessons about perception. For much of history, people have emphasized differences, sometimes turning them into boundaries of identity or justification for division. Yet science reveals that diversity is not about separation, but about adaptation and chance. No single trait defines or limits humanity. All are variations on a shared theme, reflections of the same journey from Africa outward, through deserts, forests, mountains, and coasts. To see diversity as richness rather than division is to see humanity in its fullness, to recognize the beauty of adaptation and the depth of connection. Today, in an interconnected world, human diversity continues to evolve. Global migration blends populations once separated by vast distances. Modern medicine and technology reduce some pressures of natural selection, while new environments, diets, and lifestyles create new challenges. The human body is still adapting, still responding to conditions, still carrying forward the legacy of survival. The diversity we see today is not the final chapter but part of an ongoing story. A reminder that humanity is always changing, always becoming. To reflect on modern human diversity is to see the human body as both a record and a promise. It records the paths taken, the climates endured, the adaptations made. It promises resilience, the capacity to endure whatever comes. Each shade of skin, each shape of body, each genetic trait is a chapter in the shared story of survival. Diversity is not something apart from humanity. It is humanity, the living expression of one species meeting the many faces of the earth. And so, in the gentle unfolding of this story, diversity emerges not as a barrier but as a bond. It connects us to ancestors who walked across deserts, who hunted in forests, who built homes by rivers. It connects us to one another, reminding us that differences are simply reflections of adaptation, that beneath every variation lies the same human heart. To honor diversity is to honor the journey of all humanity, a journey written in our bodies, carried in our genes, and shared in every breath we take. 19. Evolution in the present day. When we think of evolution, we often imagine it as something that happened long ago, a process that shaped the distant past, but has since slowed to a standstill. Yet the truth is gentler and more surprising. Humans are still evolving. The human body continues to adapt, sometimes in ways too subtle to notice, sometimes in ways that unfold over centuries rather than millennia. Evolution in the present day does not look like the dramatic changes of the past, when our ancestors first stood upright or began to use tools. Instead, it is woven into the fabric of daily life, into our diets, environments, technologies, and the pressures we place upon ourselves. To reflect on present-day evolution is to realize that the story of the human body is still being written, moment by moment, generation by generation. One of the clearest examples of recent evolution is lactose tolerance. For most of human history, adults could not digest lactose, the sugar in milk, because the gene responsible for breaking it down. But in populations that domesticated animals for milk, a genetic change allowed lactose digestion to continue into adulthood. This adaptation provided a steady source of nourishment and hydration, especially in times of scarcity. Today, lactose tolerance is common in populations with long histories of herding, such as in Europe, East Africa, and parts of the Middle East, while in many other parts of the world, lactose intolerance remains the norm. This small but significant change shows that evolution is not frozen, but still responding to human ways of life. Another example can be found in resistance to disease. Throughout history, pandemics and epidemics have exerted strong selective pressure on populations. Genes that provided protection against certain illnesses were favored and passed on. Even today, genetic traits reflect past encounters with disease. For instance, variations in immune system genes, such as those involved in recognizing and fighting pathogens, differ across populations, depending on the diseases most common in their histories. Some of these variations are tied to ancient interactions with other human lineages, such as Neanderthals and Denisovans, whose DNA contributed to the immune systems of modern humans. In this way, our bodies still carry the echoes of ancient encounters, but they also continue to respond to new challenges in the present. Modern lifestyles themselves are shaping evolution. Changes in diet, for example, influence metabolism. In some regions, populations have adapted to high-starch diets, with genetic variations that increase the number of copies of a gene responsible for breaking down starch. In others, fatty diets have influenced metabolism in different ways. These shifts reveal that the foods we eat do more than nourish us in the moment. They shape our bodies over generations. Even high-altitude adaptations are still evolving today. Populations in the Andes, the Himalayas, and the Ethiopian highlands each developed unique solutions to low-oxygen environments. Some evolved larger lung capacities, others more efficient oxygen transport, and still others genetic changes that reduce the harmful effects of hypoxia. These adaptations are relatively recent in evolutionary terms, appearing within the last several thousand years. They show that human bodies can continue to adapt rapidly to environmental pressures, even in the present day. At the same time, modern medicine and technology have shifted the pressures of natural selection. Illnesses and conditions that once prevented survival or reproduction are now often managed with treatments, allowing individuals to live longer and healthier lives. This does not mean evolution has stopped, but that the pressures have changed. Instead of being shaped primarily by disease or environment, humans may now be shaped by factors such as technology, culture, and even personal choice. The body's future is linked not only to biology, but to the ways we live and the environments we create. Global migration also plays a role in present-day evolution. As populations mix, genetic diversity increases, creating new combinations of traits. This blending reduces isolation and spreads adaptations more widely, weaving the human species together more closely than ever before. In some ways, this may slow the development of local adaptations, as gene flow blends differences. In other ways, it strengthens humanity's resilience by increasing diversity, providing more options for adaptation in the face of future challenges. Urban environments introduce new pressures as well. Dense populations, artificial light, pollution, and new patterns of diet and activity all influence health and survival. The body must adapt to environments very different from the natural ones in which it first evolved. Conditions such as obesity, diabetes, and heart disease reflect mismatches between ancient adaptations and modern lifestyles. Over time, Genetic shifts may occur in response to these challenges, though cultural changes often move faster than biology. Still, the possibility remains that the human body will continue to adjust, slowly shaping itself to meet the demands of urban life. Even technology itself may become a force of evolution. With the rise of medical interventions, genetic engineering, and new reproductive technologies, humans may soon influence their own evolution more directly than ever before. While this raises questions beyond biology, it also reflects the same patterns seen throughout history, the body and culture shaping one another, intertwined in an ongoing dance. Whether through tools, farming, or medicine, humans have always altered their environments, and in doing so, altered themselves. Present-day evolution may simply be the latest chapter in this ancient story. It is also worth reflecting on how evolution works at a pace that often escapes human notice. Changes accumulate slowly, across generations, visible only when we look back over centuries. Yet even now, traits are being favored, genes are shifting, and the human body is responding to the conditions of modern life. The same forces that shaped our ancestors' chance, adaptation, survival, and reproduction are still at work. They are quieter in a world with medicine and technology, but they have not vanished. To see evolution in the present day is to recognize that humanity is not a finished product. We are not fixed but fluid, always becoming, always adapting. The body we inhabit is both ancient and new, carrying the legacy of countless generations while responding to the moment at hand. Diversity, resilience, and change remain central to what it means to be human. And so, as we consider this chapter of the story, we see that evolution is not only in the distant past, but in the quiet present. It is in the genes that digest milk, the lungs that breathe thin air, the immune systems that remember disease. It is in the blending of populations, the pressures of new diets, and the challenges of modern life. The human body, always in motion, continues to evolve, carrying forward the story of adaptation into the future. To reflect on this is to recognize that we are part of an unfolding journey, still being shaped by forces both seen and unseen. The story of evolution did not end with us. It continues within us, every day, every breath, every life lived. 20. Gentle conclusion. What makes us human? As we reach the final part of this long and quiet journey through the evolution of the human body, it is fitting to pause and reflect on what all these changes mean. We have traced the path from ancient primates in forest canopies to modern humans who stride across the globe. We have seen the rise of bipedalism, the shaping of the hand, the mastery of fire, the expansion of the brain, the power of voice, the bonds of cooperation, the migrations into new lands, the adaptations to climates, the flowering of symbolic thought, the shift to agriculture, the dialogue with disease, and the diversity that defines us today. Each of these steps was not a sudden leap, but a slow unfolding, a quiet accumulation of changes that together made us who we are. And yet, even as we have examined the details, the deeper question remains softly present. What makes us human? At one level, the answer lies in biology. To be human is to carry a body that stands upright, with a curved spine and legs built for walking. It is to have hands with strong, opposable thumbs, capable of both strength and precision. It is to have a brain far larger than expected for our body size, folded and intricate, housing memory, imagination, and self-awareness. It is to have a face that shows emotion, a voice that carries language, and a body capable of enduring deserts, forests, tundras, and mountains. These are the physical traits that distinguish us, the markers of evolution written in flesh and bone. Yet biology alone does not hold the whole answer. What makes us human is also the way we use these gifts. Our bodies are instruments, but we are defined by how we play them. The upright stance allowed our hands to be free, but it was the mind that imagined tools, art, and music. The hand could hold a stone, but it could also hold another hand in comfort or in love. The brain could solve problems, but it could also create stories, weave myths, and wonder about stars. The voice could call out in warning, but it could also sing lullabies and whisper poetry. To be human is to live not only in a physical world, but in a world of meaning, carried and shared across generations. Another part of the answer lies in connection. Humans are not solitary creatures. Our survival has always depended on each other, from the care of infants to the sharing of food, from the teaching of skills to the passing down of stories. We are beings of relationship. The body itself reflects this truth. The eyes that reveal attention, the face that shows feeling, the voice that carries thought. To be human is to belong, to find identity not only in oneself, but in the web of bonds that tie individuals into families, families into groups, and groups into cultures. Cooperation, empathy, and the desire to share are as much a part of humanity as bone and blood. We are also defined by imagination. Other animals live in the present, responding to immediate needs. Humans, by contrast, can live in past, present, and future all at once. We can recall memories, learn from them, and carry them into the present. We can plan futures that have not yet come, imagining possibilities beyond the horizon. We can create symbols that represent not only what is, but what could be, and then work together to make those visions real. This power of imagination is what allowed us to paint on cave walls, to plant fields and harvest crops, to build cities and civilizations. It is what allows us to gaze at the stars and wonder what lies beyond, to ask questions that reach beyond survival and into meaning. Diversity is another mark of humanity. We are not all the same, and that variation is not a weakness but a strength. Skin tones, body shapes, languages, and cultures are all part of the tapestry of human life. Each difference reflects adaptation, history, and chance. Together they form a whole far greater than any single part. To be human is to embody both unity and diversity, to recognize that we are one species shaped by many paths. Diversity does not separate us. It enriches us, reminding us of the journeys our ancestors took and the resilience they carried. Perhaps most profoundly, to be human is to seek meaning. We are not content simply to live. We wish to understand. From the earliest myths to the philosophies of today, humans have asked who we are, where we came from, and what our lives mean. We have sought patterns in the stars, spirits in the forests, and truths in the quiet of reflection. This search is not an accident of culture, but a part of our nature, born from the expanding brain and the imaginative mind. It is why we tell stories, create rituals, and pass down traditions. It is why we teach, why we remember, why we dream. The human body, then, is more than a biological machine. It is the vessel of spirit, imagination, and relationship. It is the record of millions of years of change, the archive of adaptations that carried us through forests, across savannas, into mountains and deserts, and across oceans. Every bone, every muscle, every breath carries the imprint of this history, and yet the body is also the beginning of something more, the capacity to live in worlds of meaning, to connect with others, and to imagine futures not yet real. As we bring this story to a close, it is important to remember that evolution has not ended. The human body continues to adapt, and humanity continues to change. The journey is ongoing, shaped by environments, cultures, and choices. We are both the product of the past and the creators of the future. To be human is to be part of this unfolding, to stand at the meeting point of what has been and what will be. And so, What makes us human is not only our upright stance, our clever hands, or our large brains. It is the way we use them to care for one another, to imagine possibilities, to tell stories, to create beauty, and to seek meaning. It is the way we live in communities, finding identity and connection. It is the way we embody diversity, yet remain one species, one family bound together by shared origins. It is the way we carry the past within us, while reaching toward futures we cannot yet see. In the quiet reflection of this conclusion, we see that the gift of humanity is not perfection but possibility. We are creatures of adaptation, of imagination, of resilience. We are beings who walk upright, not only on the earth, but also in the worlds of meaning we create. We are human, fragile, enduring, diverse, and united, shaped by the long arc of evolution, carrying forward the story with every step, every thought, and every breath.